Okay, it is March 8th. Welcome to the joint Concord-Carlisle School Committee's meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and we will call the meeting to order and take a roll call, please.
And call the Concord School Committee meeting to order as well.
Oh, do we actually have to? No,
You actually do not need a roll call.
We're all here. We don't need to do a roll call. So we are all here and we are ready to go. Just a note about tonight's agenda that we are having a very brief action item right now, followed by an executive session. Exit this meeting for a little bit.
Somebody's got audio on for me.
And we'll return at 6:30. Are we still at 6? Is it?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yep.
We'll do our best.
Yes. And then we will resume the rest of the agenda at that time. Okay.
Yes.
And so, Dr. Hunter?
Great, thank you. So as you know, the last few weeks, 6 weeks really, we've been searching for an assistant superintendent of finance and operations to replace Jared as of July 1st. It's been a very inclusive process. We had a committee that screened resumes and then candidates, which a few of you served on, and included a number of staff, other leaders, really a nice range of stakeholders for a lot of feedback and input. We did that on Zoom 3 weeks ago or so. Last week, we took the finalists that were narrowed down and had them on site for a day each. There were 2. They then were able to meet with the entire administrative team. They were able to meet with a wide range of business office and other groups of staff that they would interact with. We got out to a couple of schools, and in small groups, each of you had a chance to dialogue and then send me feedback individually. So I spent the weekend, after doing reference checks, reviewing that whole process, taking in my own thoughts as the days went by, really taking the feedback and aggregating it. And then the really great news, there were 2 really, really strong candidates. So it was never about capacity and competence. It was about experiences that might move us forward, fit for sure, and just other nuances, which was a really good place to be. That's, I think, the best case scenario. So after a lot of input and deliberation, I am bringing forward to you tonight Robert Conry as the recommended candidate for Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. Just a little bit about him. He is currently the business director in Berlin-Boylston Regional District in Central Massachusetts. He's been there for about 6 years. Pretty extensive private financial history before that, including 10 years at Harvard, managing their philanthropy benefactors of quite substantial amounts. So we're looking forward to what he can bring to us, and excited to bring him forward for consideration tonight.
Great.
Thank you.
So I guess we take a motion for a vote and then have a discussion at that moment, unless anybody has any comments to make before we begin. All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept technically the appointment, the recommendation?
The recommendation, and then,
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion. I can move to approve the recommendation of the superintendent on the appointment of Robert Conry to the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, contingent upon the negotiation of a mutually acceptable contract.
Correct.
Second.
Discussion?
They're great,
Yes.
both of them.
Welcome.
Yeah.
2 very, very qualified
Yeah,
candidates.
it's very
Yes.
qualified.
I enjoyed that
Yeah.
review process, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good couple of days.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye. Okay, that's easier.
Freeing.
And it passes. Okay, thank you all
Unanimously.
for our members of the public who are here with us right now. We will return 6:30 to open session. So we'll see you then. Thank you.
Need a motion for this?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Sorry.
I move that the Concord School
Thank
Committee
you.
and the Concord-Carlisle School Committee will enter into executive session under Purpose 3 of the Open Meeting Law to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the CCHS tutors and CCHS bus drivers unions, and Purpose 2 of the Open Meeting Law to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations, and return to open session at 6:30 PM.
No, we do need to roll
Second.
call exec. Right.
You
We need to
seconded?
roll.
I did.
Roll
That is,
call?
oh, okay.
And
So
we don't need to roll call, right?
We do need to
Or
roll
aye?
call executive session. Am I in memory?
Let's play it safe. I'm not
Yes,
sure
okay.
tonight. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
we'll double check
All
that.
aye. Oh, no,
Both
we're all
aye
aye.
for both.
No, we don't have to roll call, right?
I think we do have to roll call for executive session.
Oh, Anderson, aye.
Sorry, we'll have to check it. It's been so long.
Yeah, but we'll cover our bases.
Yes,
We'll cover our bases.
Okay.
Yes.
Mustafi, I for region.
it's my turn.
Oh,
No, my turn.
Rainey.
Rainey, aye for both. Sorry.
Rankin, I.
For both.
And Wilson, I for region.
Okay.
All right,
know.
thanks.
We'll get back.
That
Exactly.
1 minute doesn't, pushes it.
I know. Sorry about that.
Pardon?
We're live.
We're live. Hi, welcome back. We will return to our open session, and we'd like to welcome our student update now. And I'm going to log in so I can see. I know we have Harry here. Is that what I see?
Yeah, we're both here.
Fantastic. I'm just logging in so I
We
can
have
see.
a presentation for this week. I'm just not sure that I'm able to screen share.
Aaron will have to give you permission. Just a minute, Harry.
How do they oh,
I know.
Aaron has to spotlight them during the time.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Here we
Is
go.
that better?
Yes.
Let me try it. Oh, yes, I could do it now. Perfect.
Great.
Sorry, everyone. Okay. So, yeah, it's just a quick little update we have this week. I could take the first slide. So, obviously, this past Monday, the big thing, the school adopted like a mask optional policy. And I think the change was pretty dramatic at first. I mean, Darcy, I don't know how you felt into school A block on Monday. It was definitely a weird feeling, especially being sophomores. You know, we hadn't been at the school without masks before. But I think people got adjusted to it pretty quickly. And I also think that people who are still wearing masks don't really feel like they are looked down upon or like thought of differently. And I think this also really helped by the fact that, like, I would say a great number of the teachers, more than half of mine, are still wearing masks. And also in almost all of my classes, teachers have asked, like, if anyone feels uncomfortable with the teacher not wearing a mask, and they've offered to put it back on. And then also, like, February break, I think, provided a nice reset for everyone, leaving most people ready to learn, kind of. I think we needed that after sort of a tiring midterm schedule and stuff like that. And one thing, a quick little update, we mentioned this during the last meeting, but we're still looking to connect with the CMS Student Council just to get some feedback from other schools besides the high school. And we're hopefully going to do that this Thursday. So at our next meeting, we should have some feedback from that. And Darcy, I don't know if you want to take this next slide.
Yeah, so kind of what Harry already said, but we've actually had a pretty smooth transition to mask optional. I would say majority of the students aren't wearing masks, but then the students who choose to, I feel like are being treated with respect, which is good. And then sort of some ideas some events happening looking ahead. So next, this coming Saturday is the St. Patrick's Day Luncheon, and it's an event hosted by student government, and it allows kind of us to give back and do like a volunteer work. And then next Wednesday is the dodgeball tournament, because we have a half day Wednesday. Student government is starting a big dodgeball tournament. The following Friday is the Boston Children's Hospital blood drive. We host a blood drive twice a year. Student Senate runs it, and it's great. We get a lot of blood donations, which is great, especially at the start of 2021, or this last fall, when we were very short on blood. It was great to kind of organize that. And then Monday, March 21st, the start of spring sports season. So right now it's currently off season, but preseason for a lot of athletes. So it's great. that next Monday, we're going to start spring sports, the following Monday. And then March 22nd and March 23rd, we have grade 10 MCAS, and we're the only grade level that does MCAS. So that's a big thing. And it's their final year doing MCAS, which is cool.
Yeah, it was just a quick little update. There's not too much going on in general.
Great. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I beg to differ. I mean,
There's always a lot going on.
As we'll see in the recognitions,
Yes.
and I think if you receive Mr. Mastrullo's emails, you'll see there is a lot going on. There are debates, there's writing, there's equestrian stuff, there's and all of these activities that you guys are organizing in every club, and it's just so nice to see just vitality coming back in full force. It's great.
Great.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we are at the public comment section of the first public comment section of our evening. As a reminder, we have public comment from the public in person with us, and then we'll follow that with people on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom, please use the participants tab to raise your hand, but note that we do have members of the public here, so we will ask them first if they'd like to speak.
The webinar, can
Ooh.
people raise their hand?
I don't
They're raising.
Good, thank you.
I have a participants tab on my screen.
no, that's
so I
fine.
think- yeah,
Good.
I think it's okay. And so it's not the, can I just finish the little spiel, right? Yeah, when you speak, you have to give your, if you've never spoken with us before, you give your name and your address for the minutes that we have to record. And it is not the school committee's practice to, it's a time for the members of the public to share ideas, concerns, thoughts, anything, raise questions. But we don't tend to respond during the meeting, and we'd love to give everybody their opportunity to speak. So please join us in the audience here. You can go. Yeah.
Yeah, is it too high?
Much. Okay, so what do I have, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so my son is a first-year METCO student who's currently in the 6th grade. Despite a lottery system, we went through what was perceived to be a rigorous application process to gain access to Concord's high-quality education and enriching opportunities. Since joining, my son has endured multiple experiences of implicit and explicit racial discrimination from educators and other students. I followed up on these incidents, of which I know of, which some representatives of the school have ignored, and others do not have the cultural competency training to properly address. To date, my request with the meeting with the school district leadership has not been acknowledged by the superintendent's office, and the absence of resolve has left my son feeling singled out as a child of color who must endure all of these incidents of racial hate and racial bias, as well as racial discrimination throughout his educational journey. Having reviewed today's presentation, I appreciate the stated conscious effort to provide culturally responsive practices, as well as the stated filtering of every policy. Time check?
No, don't worry.
Okay, filtering of every policy and practice decision through an equity lens. In recent conversations with another parent, also new to the district, I've learned a similar lack of outreach. Regarding the district's work around inclusion, district stakeholders and administrators must engage in uncomfortable yet desperately needed conversations about race, racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is impossible to work collaboratively to identify priorities and co-construct an educational equity treatment plan that will lead us to just outcomes and experiences for all students. It appears the quantitative and qualitative data that is sought in the presentation who's going to be presented later on today, all of that information is currently in your hands. And while the 37 quotes that has been presented suggest that the school has their hands on the pulse of the issues, the district's current response to incidents of hate, racist bias, and racial discrimination suggests lip praise and performative activism. I am concerned that the current discipline and restoration policies for hate, racial bias, and racial discrimination are not only reflective of a culturally responsive district. Furthermore, there are 34 emerging themes outlined in the presentation which suggest that there are many goals in which need to be prioritized. We are demanding that the response to hate, racial bias, and racial discrimination incidents be among those in the forefront. That said, the first step in the restorative process is to acknowledge that a number of complaints and open issues have gone without resolution. We are demanding that Concord come up with an immediate plan to address and resolve all open complaints of hate, racial bias, and racial discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just give your name and address for the
Sure, my name
minutes?
is Marlisa Frederick. I live at 108 Spencer Street in Dorchester, Mass.
Fantastic, thank you.
Good evening, folks. Good evening.
Can you please start with your name and address for the record?
How you guys doing?
We're good.
How's it
Thank you.
been? You guys feel good being back in person?
Yes.
That's good. Okay, so my name
Thank
is
you for
Domingos
joining
DeRosa. I live at 1569 River Street, Boston, Mass. We are a collective group of Boston parents and concerned citizens who are committed to the education of our children. Our mission is to be a supportive and collaborative entity that can work directly with the school system on significant, outstanding equality changes. We are also an advocacy group for the other MECO families whose children are experiencing trauma due to the lack of racial harmony, microaggression, and systematic racism that they face while attending school here in Concord. We'd like to congratulate Mr. Nietzsche on his position as Director of Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion. We commend the Concord Public School System for making the significant steps in creating an anti-racist district. We know that throughout the history of MECO, the issue our children face as it relates to race and discrimination have not changed over the past 25 years. We want to fully be transparent while assuming good intentions. We are concerned that the presentation, while addressing many of the issues our children face, has no details as to the policies, procedures, and practice that will change in the school. The data you are seeking in the first phase of the plan is already available to you as it pulses in the plan itself. And readily available, and you have a pulse on the issues, The district currently responds to incident of hate, racial bias, and racial discrimination is inadequate. The lack of responsive from the Title IX coordinator is both out of compliance and illegal. We request a clear time frame to change occurrences, including not limited to bias response to current parent concerns. The district and the school educational equality statement should be more than just words. Education equality should be it should be at the heart of what all schools says and do. If this is truly a commitment to educational equality for Black and brown students, it will be evident in what you do, see, and hear and feel with every aspect of the school life. In human, a simple check of pulse provides vital information on how well the heart is functioning. If the pulse is irregular, it is indicating that the heart hasn't functioned properly, and this can be negatively impacted other parts of the body as well. The same holds true to how the school is committed to the education equalities. We have a list of demands. I'm not a guy that likes to send email. This is what the group put together. So I'm gonna speak a little bit from the heart. I shoot from the head. There's a lot of things happening in Concord. And there's a group of us parents in Boston who have noticed this over the years. My son's been in the program since kindergarten. He's going into his junior year. The same issue still occurs. We bring the concerns to the school itself, and now we're bringing it to you, the body that governs the school. We have tried every avenue of communication. This is why we drove in from Boston, to make sure that we see who you are and you see who we are. Because we will be present at these meetings, to make sure that these policy procedures that has been written, and again, there's an empty seat here, I would like to sit in that seat. So we can work on the policies together. It doesn't have to be myself, but an individual who represents the group of parents coming from Boston with their children. The issues that we face in the classroom, when your child is put in the middle of the class to kind of gain control of who he or she is, doesn't sit well. Our children are lacking because of the way they're being taught, not because they're not able to compete. My son's been here since kindergarten. He's never been a kid that wasn't adventurous. He's in Concord, he lives in Dorchester. You gotta have an adventure getting here. Traffic starts it, right? So let's be mindful of these children. We're a different group of people, right? We're moving into a better world. We got a war on the other side of the country, and we're fighting in our own backyard. We can't continue to teach like this. I'm an educator too. I spent 30 years working for the city of Boston, working with at-risk youth, which every youth in my eyes is at risk, because when we send them to school, you don't know what can happen, right? So we're asking for you to take the notes, the emails that we're sending to you, and read them, and come up with a plan. Give us a time. 3 minutes is not going to fix the issue. But I know we can work together to make it better for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who do we have?
We have Naya Wilson. Naya, you can unmute yourself, and if you care to add your video, thank you.
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
How are you?
We're good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because we can definitely hear you. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, so my name is Dr. Naya Wilson, and I've been part of the Concord-MECL program for 22 years. I'm also an urban educational leader. Both of my children, my son graduated in 2014. My daughter currently is in CCHS. She just broke the 300 record for the school. So proud of my baby, Abby.
Nice.
Throughout their time, they have experienced caring educators who have supported them both academically and emotionally. They have also experienced racism at its core. The impact of their experience forced me as a parent to have the same exact conversation with them that my parents had with me when I attended Brookline Public Schools over 40 years ago. So I asked, when will the cycle end? Fortunately, my children are learning to be proactive advocates for social justice. But unfortunately, I have tried, and I'm working with my children. They have adopted a hardened view of the world with little hope of racial harmony. After reviewing Mr. Nemici's presentation, we at the group became really hopeful when we read the stated commitment to recognizing the need to redistribute access and opportunity to our historically marginalized students, employees, and families. I was like, that's amazing. We understand that in order for all of our students to have true access and opportunity, it's the gatekeeping practices that have to stop. The data shows the disproportionality between children of color, high needs children, and their white counterparts, and gaining access and opportunity to advanced level coursework. Which practices and policies will be evaluated to support the closing of this gap is the question that we ask. We also recognize that you had made a commitment to professional development. We believe that optional or one-time professional development without accountability for implementation will not impact the student experience. Adjusting the current curriculum or even adopting a new innovative equity-based curriculum that provides more mirrors, windows, and doors for students requires that all teachers have multi-year professional development focused on equity. We are interested in hearing more on how you plan to address this challenge. This is very adaptive work and it's very challenging. So there's programs that you already have in place, like the Calculus Project. And when these programs are well-funded and implemented with fidelity, these programs are models for bridging the gap in the opportunity. They provide a direct pipeline to advance coursework and motivate our students to consider lucrative STEM fields, which historically have not been accessed by Black and Brown children. So we require that programming that leads to the elimination of disproportionality in access to advanced coursework. So my name is Dr. Naya Wilson. I live at 51 Evelyn Street in Mattapan. I'm currently the principal of Randolph Community Middle School, and I was a Boston principal for many, many years. I have a long history in Concord, and we're asking this group of people that we're working with, we're really looking at what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, are there other members of the public? We have time for one more comment. If there are any, if not, we return to public comment at the end, if other ideas arise. Okay, thank you for the members who joined us in public, for those who joined us virtually, and we will now go to recognitions. With this, we have, I believe, tonight, members from the CCHS Nordic
A
team.
little early, but hopefully they're on.
Oh,
We
yeah,
told them 7, but that's,
we told them 7. Well, we can,
Am I remembering somebody else's 7?
Yes, they
We did
said they
say
were going to
so.
be on at 7.
Okay. We can
We
quickly
can
do
do our
the
minutes?
minutes.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
if
All
they're
right.
not here.
Yep. Okay. Is there a motion to accept the minutes from the open session of February 1st, 2022?
So moved.
I second them.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and is there a motion to accept the minutes of the executive session of February 15th?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. We can move to
correspondence.
correspondence. Yep.
I think Concord Public Schools received 2 pieces of correspondence.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, and we received a correspondence, what?
Maybe it was 1 and you have 1, yeah.
Yeah, we received one today, about students, no, about the BD.
Oh,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
yes, well, that's liaison, or I guess it's correspondence. So yes, I did receive correspondence from the chair of the select board. They voted last night at the select board meeting to convert, I believe it's a different level of a parking lot so that they can provide more enforcement of Concord-Carlisle High School students parking at the BD lot. So I'm sure the superintendent and the principal will be in contact with the Kate
We've
Hodges.
been in.
No, I'm not saying
contact
that
up
they
to
can
them.
take it in tow now, so
Yep.
I'm not sure when that will commence, but I want to be sure the students are aware that that's a possibility. I'm not sure how it would be handled in terms of payment. I don't know.
That will be between the police and the family.
Right, I just want the
Driver.
students to be aware. I think they're going to post new signage, et cetera, but yeah.
Yeah, we haven't heard from them on
Exactly.
the next steps.
Okay,
Correct me if I'm wrong, we had correspondence that was consistent with what we heard tonight for
correct.
public
Yes,
remarks.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
And can I just make a comment that all school committee members receive every piece of correspondence that comes to the
Yes.
school committee, and it's been read by all of us.
Yes, absolutely.
And by the superintendent.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So now it's, those things don't take as long as they usually do.
I tried, we're having a technical glitch. So I can fix it.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
because we're not going to have time for a liaison, chair and liaison support, definitely not time for discussion or any items that we have.
There we go.
Sure.
Will the correspondence be read into the minutes this meeting?
We do not read the correspondence into the minute. That's not, we've never read all the correspondence into
But the public comment will.
But the public comment.
This will be posted
the-
online, probably the next day or 2.
This will be posted online. The public comments,
I
there's,
just want to make sure it's documented.
oh yeah, no, the minutes will record, well, that's why we need the name and address also. So we have the name and address and a synopsis of what was said by each speaker who joined us is always added into the minutes.
Yep.
We do try to record with fidelity
Mhm.
but not in the entirety.
Mhm.
Yeah, fair enough.
Chairs and liaisons.
Pardon? Chairs and liaisons report, right?
Yeah, we could.
Do we, yeah, we can move to, we can do at least one of those, I guess. Is there?
Yeah, just let us know when they become available.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go if you want.
Okay.
So for liaison, I can report on a couple of items, 3 in number. The Concord Sister City Nanai group met again on Sunday, and they're planning for a resumption of Nanai, Japan, and Concord, Massachusetts exchanges. Where the high school sits with that is a bit uncertain, as our previous 2 teachers who were leading those efforts are no longer with us. So we're in a bit of transition on the school side, but conversations are ongoing with the principal. The Public Access Advisory Committee met last week, and they continue to discuss the efforts by Minuteman Media and the school department to outfit this room such that Minuteman Media wouldn't require quite such extensive physical setup each time we come on board. The monies in the current town budget for that upgrade are probably not adequate to do what Mark Pauley and Peter Kelly will ultimately recommend to the superintendent and the town manager, but we'll see how close we can get. And then finally, we had tentative plans for a policy subcommittee meeting this week. That is not coming to pass. We will set a date in the very near future to continue work that is already underway. And then we would also note that we have received an advisory from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and their guidance through the Attorney General Civil Rights Division, advising us to look at and potentially update our non-discrimination policy and harassment policies. There's been some changes on the legal side that might enter into our policy side of our work.
Yeah,
So-
they worked with they worked with the Attorney General to update the policies, yeah.
So that will be on the docket for the future.
Good.
Thank you.
There you go. I can go. Yeah. So I am DEI chair. We had a DEI meeting last week that we had a little Zoom bombing in the middle of it. So we had to get an extra link. So we are working through that technical difficulty there. Andrew gave us our presentation. We had members of the public come and comment at the end. And we had the ability to give Andrew some feedback. Oh, I'm sorry. We gave Andrew some feedback on his presentation for tonight. So you all received the presentation ahead of time and should have seen that. And then he's going to present to all of us, kind of the same presentation, but in a little bit different format with some of our questions in there. And our next meeting, I believe we have scheduled.
It's the 13th.
And our DEI meetings are posted on the school committee website. So you can find links to those. They will continue on Zoom for now. We might go into hybrid at some point. I don't know. We haven't even discussed that. And then in terms of our school committee training, we are really working through those dates. We have 2 out of the 3 that are working, but again, important to make sure we're all available for those. So we may need to move one, just given the fact that we have town meeting and other things coming up in April and May. We might have to move the last one to the summer. So just bear with me on the schedule. Dr. Martin and I are working on it. I think the 15th is definitely a go. We will be in this room 4 to 7, and then Dr. Martin and Ed Burns will be with us on Zoom. So we'll be present, they'll be on Zoom. Any questions about that?
No. I think our meeting was April 13th. We couldn't do the first week.
Yes, because we had a conflict and I need to get back to Dr. Hunter and check with Erin to make sure that's a possibility, because we were trying to change the time due to the half-day K-5. But I think you have a PTG meeting that might conflict with it. So I'll send Erin an email.
So
Okay, the 6th, right?
Right. So that's why it was, because normally we meet the first Wednesday.
Yeah.
We usually meet right after the PTG meeting. But the idea is to move to a different week.
Different day, and then we won't have a conflict, but I will double check with your calendar on that before we get that posted.
Okay.
And then it is March, and we started, I feel like I'm the unofficial liaison to school committee coffees that I'm trying to remember. We have to go back to Carlisle in March. We made that commitment to do that. And I think we should talk about maybe having some public coffees again in the spring, now that everybody's back and present and gathering. I think the weather would be nice. We do outside, we do inside, because I think it would be important to get back out.
We can go inside.
We can go inside. So it'd be important to get back out with the community.
Absolutely.
If you remember, we had 3, I think 3 or 2. 3.
We had Concord, we had library, we had CCHS.
Yes, right. And so now we need to do Carlisle, and then maybe we just go around again, just to give more people opportunity to come.
And traditionally, we almost always have a couple of coffees before town meeting, just to have people come and talk about the budget and or warrant articles.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So more to come on that.
Yep. Town meetings, I should say.
Can CPAC did not meet since last we have all met, but I'm I did speak with the president earlier this week, and one thing, next time I come to a chairs meeting, I just want to make sure that we iron out some dates for their annual presentation to the school committee. They'll start working with you about the awards, and then just firming up when the literacy presentation might
We
be.
have
So
tentative dates for
yeah.
all of that, so we just have to
firm them up. Okay, great, awesome. So that's it.
Great.
So should I just maybe I'll give a quick update. We had a meeting, CPAC, parents and CPAC members had a roundtable discussion around diversity, equity, and inclusion with our Debbie Dixon and our interim director of student services present, and Andrew. It was a very good discussion, very helpful to parents to learn about the needs of our students with special educational needs, to feel to bridge some of the gaps of inclusion. Parents of students that are placed out of districts also were present and included in the conversation, so that was very helpful. We heard some wonderful feedback about stories coming from middle schools of a program, the body program from one of the families, so definitely making impact. Grateful to, and everyone was very grateful to Andrew for leading such discussion and including parents of students with special education as well. Thank you.
All right. If everybody from the Nordic team is here, please.
I see Coach Campbell, so.
Okay, there's so many people here. I'm
Yeah.
scanning for names, but I don't think I'm keeping up with them. They move.
You have students on there.
Do we have coaches?
There are 5 of us on the team. We have 2 coaches and 3 captains.
Okay.
If they raise their hands, does that help? Aaron?
They're on.
Yep.
Good.
Just so tonight we have members from the Nordic ski team that we extend a fantastic congratulations on a wonderful season. Before we welcome you guys, I would like to quickly share my screen, or if Aaron, if you can share that slide that I sent you. Is that possible? Perfect. Yep. We can make that big. That's great. I just want to acknowledge all of the coaches and all of the volunteers who have made this winter season our first back to normal-ish, I think, real season. And kudos to everybody for an amazing effort all around. And so I just want to take a moment to appreciate the amount of the contributions of who goes into making all these seasons great.
And we do have one additional team not on here, which is gymnastics, because it's like a consortium team.
Yes.
And so I will just say Bill Kane is the coach of that.
Nice. Thank you very much.
And I'd love at some point just to kind of note all the clubs that we have and the teachers who lead these clubs, the adults who make all of this, help all the kids with these, because it's very much appreciated, I think, coming out of COVID. We appreciate this more and more. So with that, Nordic ski team, please.
Coach Campbell, why don't you start us off and give us a few more details? All I know about is a mosh pit. So.
Yes, the mosh pit. The mosh pit and the dancing. We take our skiing seriously. We take our dancing seriously. I could go on for a long time, way beyond the time allowed to talk about this year's team. And I got to be very careful what I say, because we were here 3 years ago in the spring over at the Ripley School. I said you were looking at members of a once in a generation team back then in 2019. Both teams had won the state meet, and it's only been a few short years since we've come back here. So in Nordic time, a generation is 3 years. Enough time for younger siblings to make it into the high school. But our team did wonderfully this year, and I give the seniors a lot of credit. They put up with 2 hard years with the pandemic, very hard times in terms of, but I think Nordic was a nice outlet for them during this time. We were able to train outside even last year, but take precautions. But for the most part, it felt like a normal year this year, and I'm hoping next year feels totally normal. But we had a wonderful season. I'm really going to let the captains say a few words. I prompted them that you might be curious to know how it is that they continue to bring home trophies from the Nordic state meet. They know the answers as well as I do. But it was a great season. There's one person missing today, Isabella Sinesfet, who was our single women's champion at the state meet, which the women's team won. She's competing this week in what's called the Junior Nationals.
Wow.
Out in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Wow.
So she was part of a very select group of about 30 skiers from all over the Northeast who are competing in a competition for the whole week. She's taking the week off.
Wow.
Anyway, we'll circle back out. I just want to say thank you to the school committee for the invite, to Aaron Jonkas for all the support he gives us week in and week out. We are the high maintenance team with the transportation department for all the changes we throw at them, responding to weather. And seriously, we're very grateful for all their support. Well, let me just introduce, we have 3 captains tonight here. They're all seniors. And maybe I'll have Bryce Lublin say a few words. He's the graduating senior captain, competed for 4 years, league all-star, had a great race at states to help the boys get to second place. Bryce?
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah. I think Jeff said it really well. The team this year was really awesome. Following the legacy team we had a few years ago, it was really great to see how we performed this year at states. It was a really fun season. It's good to have a final season as a senior. And to answer Jeff's question about how we bring home the trophies, it's really the amazing coaches we have, Jeff and Kat, who do an amazing job coaching the team and bringing everyone together, helping everyone learn the skiers. But it's also just how fun the team is. We make sure we have a lot of fun while we ski. It's competitive, but it's not super competitive that we're not really having fun. Make sure we go out, ski, have fun with friends. So it's always a really good time with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bryce. Siri, do you want to say a few words on behalf of the women's team?
Yeah, sure. We're just so lucky to be at a school and a program that has the resources to get us on snow every day possible. I know this sport's really special to me and all the other captains. It's really exciting to be able to see skiers of all different abilities coming into the team and being able to compete together. Our girls team was super deep this year. We had 8 people in the top 10 in most of the league races. Maybe I'm a little, no, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And that was a variety of skiers, people who just started a few years before, people who have been skiing since they were born, basically. I don't know, it's just a cool place for everyone to get together and work hard and have fun.
Thanks, Siri. Kaylee, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Siri and Bryce said it excellently. Just adding on to the access to the equipment that we have is just amazing. And thank you to everyone who makes that possible. Us being able to go to Weston every day, and even in preseason, our access to roller skis, which is basically just fancy roller skating. Everything that the school does to make our team stronger is just amazing. And thank you for that. And thank you to our coaches.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's great to hear the stories.
Congratulations on a great season.
Thank you. And I'd just like to give a shout out to our assistant coach, Kat Johnstone, who's on the call tonight too. She's an awesome coach. She's the mom of a former state champion, Henry Johnstone, who has also competed at a very high level and is now skiing on the Williams ski team. We have a lot of talented skiers who will go on and compete in college, which is great, and which is a goal for some of them, but not for all of them. We just really cherish that we have a no-cut team walk on, and we have a lot of kids that just come on for the first time as novices and really pick up the sport, and they're just as important a part of the team. So again, very grateful for the invitation to be here, and we look forward to coming back soon.
Yes, not once in a generation, or maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
Yes.
Thank you for
Well, thank you for
joining
joining us. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Are there any other chairs and liaisons reports, or did we close that out? No?
I think so.
Fantastic. Okay, Dr. Hunter, back to you with a COVID update, please.
Thank you. Erin's going to pull up the data sheet with a couple of new recommendations for today. We actually had a pretty successful week last week. You know, we held the masks to get past the vacation break. We recorded 21 cases last week, which was a tick up from where we had been, but thankfully not excessive. And I think we feel good about waiting that week to get that behind us. We have 4 as of this morning. We have another 3 or 4 this afternoon. But again, everything seems to be fairly moderate and under control, which always we're watching for spikes or changes in the patterns. And you can see the grand totals that are there for this year. I'll update the pool testing data as that comes back over the first part of this week. So really the main discussion tonight, if Erin, you can scroll to the recommendations at the bottom, is to look at the extension of the mask optional practice. Right now, we are still masking on the buses. Over very recently, over the late part of the break and early last week, the CDC changed the guideline to really clarify, I think more than anything else, that the recommendation to be masked is not pertinent to school transportation. Mm-hmm. So I am in support of that recommendation and suggesting that you change that immediately. We have a little, it's a challenge to mask on the bus and not mask at school, and we probably would be better to be consistent. We had an extensive conversation at our last meeting about preschool. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at, and that should say March 21st, it's a Monday, instead of this 22nd. My recommendation, after a lot of time with the staff, talking with the leadership of the preschool, hearing what other preschools are doing in neighboring districts, and watching the data. We haven't had a preschool COVID case since January 24th. Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing since they aren't vaccinated. It's pretty great, good stuff. So I am very comfortable, having had the 2 weeks to study the patterns and talk with other districts with a mask optional policy, to go ahead and recommend that we move to that as of March 21st. The coming week and a half will give us time to communicate with families, understand, obviously the little people can't speak for themselves, so we need to really stay close with parents on what their wishes are. Yep. And who wants to remain masked and who doesn't, and really be sure we're aware and on top of that. So the week and a half would give us that, but that would be my recommendation, to move to that March 21st. And those are really the 2 priorities tonight, is to look at extension of the masking optional.
I don't even think it's not a recommendation. I think it's an action on your part at this point, because we have.
Yeah, of course, wanted to bring it here first, just
saying for protocol.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think
that's correct.
We don't have a mask face covering policy anymore.
Correct. You rescinded the policy, so I think I'm here to
but thank you
tell you the plan and hear any feedback before we execute. Yes.
So I'm just curious for elementary school, and I don't think this is possible at middle or high school. Do we have parents who are telling their classroom teachers, my son or daughter needs to wear a mask?
Certainly at the elementary school, yes.
And then they enforce it?
Oh, yes.
I don't think that's possible at the high school or the middle school.
I don't believe so either.
So,
definitely.
But there are some kids masked at high and middle.
Yeah.
Elementary, the teachers are very engaged.
Good. That's
Anecdotally, I mean, I asked my kid, there's a real mixed bag. There's a real mixed bag, I think, across the
I'm
classrooms.
saying that those parents who want their students and then they don't wear the mask.
Yeah, at elementary, the teachers are staying ahead of that, for sure.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now it is time for Andrew.
He's there, I know that. There he is.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right. So I'll get right into it.
Thank you.
Before I get into my presentation, I just want to say and acknowledge the fact that today is International Women's Day. And of course, as you all know, there's no shortage of inspiring women in our society. Just last week, I shared in a Twitter post, and I'm sure we all learned that Judge Ketanji Brown's nomination to the Supreme Court, making her the first Black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court. And then there are women like Mary Wilder, whom I'm learning about, who was the town of Concord's Female Anti-Slavery Society's first president, and the wife of the famous, very famous John Brown, the abolitionist leader who led the slave rebellion at Harper's Ferry, preceding the Civil War. Miss Wilder, if you read about her, you will learn that she spoke out aggressively against slavery, along with our famous Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. So a lot of great anti-racism history right in the town of Concord. Separately, I want to offer an appreciation to our Boston resident parents who just spoke courageously during public comment. I know, and I think I speak on behalf of our district when I say that we value your concerns, the experiences, and the expectations you have shared with us this evening. Like Mr. DeRosa said, I too very much want to work together to ensure our shared vision in the DEI and anti-racism actions come to fruition in our schools. As the African proverb reads, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This work is not a sprint. Together, we have done so much work to influence this work in our schools. And we have so much more work to do. I can say this evening that we are at a point in this work where everyone, our educators, our students, our parents and guardians, our administrators, even the school committee in our DEI subcommittee, where everyone feels we need to put our values and commitments into real action. And so this evening, I have prepared a DEI presentation that is really, focused on qualitative data from my DEI roundtable discussions. The information in this presentation will provide you all insights into the areas of DEI anti-racist actions that we need to address in order to effectively lead, everyone in our school district in DEI practices and anti-racist action. So at this moment,
I'm glad I always come on those meetings with my mic off.
So at this
Aaron will meet everyone, I think. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
So at this moment, I'm going to share my screen and I'll get right into my presentation. So give me 1 second to get set up here. Yes. I'm also very cognizant of everyone's time. I know it is 7:20, and so I will be very efficient with my time. There's a lot of information in this presentation, so I ask that you bear with me. Taking into account the demographics of our school community based on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's annual accountability report, diversity is all the ways in which we welcome, embrace, and represent the different identities and perspectives of our students, educators, staff, and parents. For example, in just our student population, there are over 51 nationalities represented K through 8 and over 70 nationalities represented at CCHS. 26.6% of students in Concord Public Schools are students of color, compared to 25.1% at CCHS, who are students of color. Our high needs students who belong to the following subgroups: former English learners, current English learners, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged students account for 25.7% at CPS and 24.7% at CCHS. Overall, CPS and CCHS accounts for just under 9% of educators of color, respectively. Our current efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since the adoption of our strategic objective on inclusive culture 5 years ago, our shared understanding and commitment to increasing the cultural competency of our educators, staff, and students has really shaped who we want to be as a school and the values of DEI and anti-racism competencies we want to be held accountable. We are making conscious effort to promote culturally responsive practices that allow our students to make personal and authentic connections in the content we teach. We've been dedicated to hiring a more diverse staff. We are beginning to filter every policy and practice decision through an equity lens that ensures everyone in our school community has access to opportunities and advancements regardless of their race, ethnicity, culture, gender, ability or disability, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. And in doing so, we recognize the critical need to redistribute access and opportunity to our historically marginalized employees, students, and families who do feel their interests have not always been prioritized. Our DEI strategic planning process. So when I assumed my role as DEI director in July 1, I shared my entry plan and timeline for how I will deliver a strategic plan focused on DEI and anti-racist action to our school district. Tonight's presentation fulfills just phase 1 of my entry plan, which is the assessment phase. This phase has involved utilizing a cross-section of internal and external resources to assess where our schools are faring well in our DEI and anti-racism efforts, to begin identifying areas of improvement, and really to gauge our preparedness to undertake this very large scope of work in our school district. So really since the fall, I have met with educators, parents, and guardians, school leaders, including the school committee, students, support staff, through a series of group discussions and individual interviews as part of my DEI roundtable discussions. All of these stakeholders shared their experiences, perceptions, factors contributing to their interests and concerns as it relates to DEI in our schools. Their feedback is critical to determining what our goals, initiatives, accountability measures will be in advancing our long-term strategic plan on diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racist action in our district. Separately, you must also know that the equity surveys and the subsequent focus groups ran concurrent with my DEI roundtable discussions, with the purpose of identifying the common causes of racial inequities in our schools and feelings and experiences on inclusion in our schools as well. Through the equity survey process, we administer surveys to faculty and staff pre-K through 12, students grades 6 through 12, and to Boston, Concord, and Carlisle parents. Additionally, a total of 10 focus groups were held. Lastly, in the coming months, the quantitative and qualitative data from the equity survey will be interpreted by me and then presented again to the school committee sometime in late May. I believe the date is May 24th. And so, be on the lookout for that presentation in the coming months. The priority areas and emerging themes. This is a summary of qualitative findings from all of my roundtable, DEI roundtable discussions. Dr. Darnisa Armanti-Jackson is an educator and racial equity strategist who is actually currently working with the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents to frame how districts really begin to frame this work around DEI and anti-racist action. Dr. Armanti-Jackson says, advancing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in a district should not look like a brand new district initiative. Rather, it should be an extension of a core value and or district strategy already in place. After in-depth summary of really all of my DEI roundtable discussions I held since the fall, I was able to identify emerging themes which have been organized into 9 priority areas that you see on this wheel chart. Those priority areas are as follows: cultural competency, school culture, culturally responsive and inclusive classrooms, racial equity and student achievement, belonging and psychological safety, student engagement, family and community engagement, diversity in hiring, and institutional accountability. In the next 9 slides, I will expand on each of these priority areas that you see on the wheel chart. I want you all to please be mindful and respectful about the fact that each of these priority areas were informed by what I heard directly from students, educators, and staff, school leaders, parents, and guardians in our school community during all of my roundtable discussions. And so first, increasing the cultural competency of every member in our school community. As you all know, this work begins with ourselves examining our own unconscious biases, identity, privilege, and social position. The general consensus and theme from my roundtable discussions is that we have to continue providing institutional support for our professional development paths because it does reflect our commitment to become competent in the cultures of those with whom we work, learn, and interact with. In addition, we have to make our professional development opportunities accessible to everyone in our school community, from the staff at Ripley, to our tutors, to our parents and guardians, to our food services and custodial staff, and especially our bus drivers. We have to continue to build capacity by leveraging affinity groups and professional learning communities to really shape how we approach and lead this work in our schools, departments, and in our classrooms. Some direct quotes, and again, as we endeavor through this presentation, I won't share every single quote, but I will touch on a few. Training on microaggressions, one stakeholder said, we have to create a professional learning community of general education and special education teachers to better understand special education services. School culture. As you all know, culture is something that surrounds us all. Our communities influence the makeup of our school culture because our students, educators, and staff come to us with a wide range of cultural backgrounds, experiences, knowledge, and beliefs. Teachers' experience of the school culture is very different from that of a student, of a parent, or even the school principal. In our efforts to ensure a more welcoming and respectful school environment that embraces all identities, we must model behaviors that center inclusion, equity, advocacy, and social justice in our schools. Here are some emerging themes from my roundtable discussions. Number one, we have to create opportunities for employees and students to build connections with each other. Students reported that they only feel connected to other students of similar racial backgrounds. While on the other hand, educators and staff reported that there are less opportunities for social engagement between colleagues to build stronger relationships. Number two, we have to normalize conversations about race, racism, microaggressions, and acceptance of members who represent the LGBTQ+ community. Students reported that while the majority of their classmates do feel comfortable having these difficult conversations around race, for example, the school culture does not normalize these topics enough for these conversations to happen organically. And then lastly, number three, we have to ensure that disability is included in the same conversation as we do with race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. Many of the stakeholders I met with reported that DEI efforts should be inclusive of the interests and needs of special education students and families. Lastly, we have to embed belonging in diversity, equity, and inclusion as the missing piece in the fight for inclusion. If members in our school community don't feel accepted and valued within the culture of our schools, they will never feel connected as individuals in our school community, nor will they feel safe enough to bring their full, authentic selves, to work or to school. And so, a direct quote from one of our stakeholders: if we felt safe to embrace ourselves publicly, then coming out will not be such a big deal in our schools. Not closing schools during the George High holidays feels anti-Semitic. We need to change the narrative that this district comprises of educators who do not care about social justice. The level of assumptions that are made toward me simply because of my accent is traumatizing. Culturally responsive and inclusive classrooms. Teachers, because of their role and authority, have considerable control over the curriculum they teach and how they foster an inclusive classroom environment. At its core, cultural responsiveness and inclusion is really about educators and staff welcoming and intentionally learning more about diversity in all students. Our district's effort to ensure our curriculum is fully inclusive and reflective of our students' identities continues to be a priority for us under the leadership of Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Kristen Herbert. Here are some emerging themes from my roundtable discussions. Number one, continuing to incorporate more windows and mirrors that culturally validates and affirm our students' identities, lived experiences, and aspirations actually motivates our students to learn. Number two, we have to incorporate more historic realities of violence, racism, and oppression against marginalized groups in the content we teach. Our students in particular are becoming more inclined to seek out classroom experiences and opportunities in our curriculum that can affirm their own learning around social justice issues. And they expect their teachers to support their curiosity to learn by incorporating these issues in the content and lesson plans that they deliver. Number three, a lot of dialogue was centered around how we normalize conversations about race and other social justice issues, particularly in the classroom. Students, parents, and even some of our educators that I met with emphasized the need for teachers and administrators to model for students that it is okay to talk about race rather than avoid or ignore it completely. Students felt that many of their peers actually feel comfortable talking about race and other social justice issues. However, they feel many adults in their school avoid engaging in these conversations when it comes up, again, particularly in the classroom, and it shows to the students that the adults are not comfortable with the topic, which in turn causes some students to become uncomfortable and upset with engaging in that conversation. Some direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. Some classrooms are welcoming, but others are not. The anticipation of which students or adults are genuinely respectful and welcoming ebbs and flows, depending on the classroom environment you're in. Teachers should introduce their pronouns with students. It will be helpful to build trust and inclusion in the classroom. Equity in student achievement. Dr. Zaretta Hammond, author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, says, equity is about making sure every student is a powerful learner. That's the equity goal we should be shooting for. Equity really ensures that students, parents, educators, and staff in our school community have access to opportunities and advancements, and that they are treated fairly regardless of their racial identity, ethnicity, religion, gender identity or expression, ability or disability, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. Here are some emerging themes from our roundtable discussions. Number one, to create equitable classroom environments for all students to have successful outcomes, we need to identify, disrupt, and eliminate the obstacles that are contributing to race and ability-based disparities between our students, particularly with our students of color and our high-need students. We have to liberate these student groups from the strongholds of policies and practices, such as tracking and ability-based groupings in math, for example, that maintain a system of inequity, so that the barriers that are placed before them no longer determines their academic outcomes and success. Let's take our partnership in the Calculus Project as an example. In just 1 year of our Calculus Project partnership with Dr. Adrian Mims, our current 8th grade Calculus Project cohort, under the support of math teachers Reiko Funaki and Kristen Callahan, have seen marked improvement to the point where 19 out of 22 Calculus Project students in 8th grade are currently recommended for enriched geometry or honors. That is 2 to 3 levels above our lowest level of math, where these students would have been had we not made the investment to partner with the Calculus Project and unlevel our math program at the middle school. So we've seen, again, great improvement there, and Dr. Adrian Mims will be presenting that information in the coming weeks to come. Number two, if you were to ask me, again, we are, in our partnership with the Calculus Project, we are beginning to intentionally reallocate resources to make real progress toward racial equity by analyzing disparities in our student achievement data through assessment and standardized test scores, enrollment, looking at enrollment in honors and AP courses, and really just being honest about the disparities that really exist between our students of color and their white peers, or between students with disabilities and wealthier and economically disadvantaged students. We know these disparities exist in our own data, and when you look, at a national standpoint, these disparities also exist in schools all across America. So Concord is certainly not immune to the disparities that our students, particularly our historically marginalized students, face in our schools. And then lastly, we have to ensure differentiation of instruction across all our classrooms. We cannot continue to assume every student is benefiting from the same supports being provided in and outside of the classroom. We need to provide students with the supports they need individually so that they have an equal chance at academic achievement and success. So a couple of direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. One particular stakeholder said, "Differentiation is not happening across our classrooms. Some teachers think students need an IEP in order to differentiate, and some teachers think they need permission from administration in order to do the same. We don't have enough time. We don't give enough time to Boston students, English learners, students, to understand our school culture and the academic expectations. The level of support and care we give to general education students feels less than the supports we give to special education students." So let's look at the 2021 MCAS data. Now we know the 2021 MCAS data, the test results showed that scores dropped in English, language arts, and especially in math, due to school districts having to, simply adapt to the COVID health pandemic, which completely interrupted student learning. However, this MCAS data from 2021, last spring, does give us a glimpse into the racial disparities that really have long existed between certain student subgroups. So I looked at, for example, our middle school as an example, particularly with the grade level 8 math MCAS. While 49% of Concord Middle School 8th graders are meeting or exceeding expectations on the MCAS as of 2021, when we look closer at the MCAS results, when the data is disaggregated by subgroup, we see a different story. When only we see a different story with only 9% of African American students in 8th grade who are meeting or exceeding expectations on math. This is in comparison to 42% Hispanic or Latino students who are meeting and exceeding expectations on the math MCAS, 58% multiracial, non-Hispanic, non-Latino students, 68% Asian students who are meeting and exceeding expectations on math. Now, I know we all want to eliminate the 2021 MCAS data. Some will argue that it was not a great reflection on student achievement due to the learning loss that students experienced during the COVID health pandemic. So I went back and looked at the 2019 MCAS data, pre-COVID, and found that 72% of Concord Middle School 8th grade students were meeting and exceeding expectations on the math MCAS. And again, when that data is disaggregated by subgroup, we see that only 10% of African American students in 8th grade were meeting and exceeding expectations on the math MCAS. So 2021 MCAS data, only 9% of African American students meeting and exceeding expectations. We go back in time to 2019, 10% African American Black students meeting and exceeding expectations on math. So you see that disparity there. While this is grim data to digest, I do have some positive news. Again, looking at pre-COVID 10th grade math MCAS data, we see, and again, this is 10th grade MCAS data, we see that 71% of our African American students were actually meeting and exceeding expectations on the math MCAS in comparison to 96% of Asian students, 75% Hispanic and Latino students, 90% multiracial, non-Hispanic, non-Latino students, and 89% white students who, again, were meeting and exceeding expectations on the 10th grade math MCAS. Additionally, a large population of our African American students are enrolled in our MECO program. And I can confidently say that when I was MECO director, by the time our Boston resident students graduated from Concord-Carlisle High School, they were scoring in the advanced and proficient range on the 10th grade MCAS. So a lot of credit is definitely due to our teachers, K through 12, whom I know work tirelessly to ensure our historically marginalized students are meeting benchmarks, not just in math, but also in reading through literacy interventions before they graduate high school. On the flip side, I also looked at advanced placement data. When we look at the DESE 2020-2021 Advanced Placement Participation Report, we see that while the roughly 13 AP courses that are accessible to our students are really available to our students. We see that there is a disparity between the enrollment levels of particularly our students of color. And again, focusing on just African American students. While 92% of African American students pass their 9th grade MCAS, only one African American student was reported to have taken an AP math course in statistics. Again, this is based on the 2020-2021 AP participation report from the DESE. Okay, so one African American student was reported to have taken an AP math course. This is in comparison to 88 white students who took an AP math course in either calculus or statistics, 17 Asian students, 10 multiracial, non-Hispanic, non-Latino students, and 7 high needs students, and just two Hispanic Latino students. Overall, 4 African American students were reported to have taken an AP course, again, in other areas, not in math. That is in comparison to 15 Hispanic and Latino students, 37 Asian students, 16 multiracial, non-Hispanic, non-Latino students, and 197 white students. And of course, that's understandable because close to 75% of students at CCHS are white. So the large enrollment of white students taking AP courses is to be expected. But again, I just want to say that with our partnership with the Calculus Project, again, our students of color, our low income and high needs students, or multiracial students will be recommended appropriately in math moving forward. And so what that means is they will have the same opportunity to reach honors and AP level courses, definitely by their 10th grade year and certainly by their junior and senior year. We have started to see the fruits of our labor per se in disrupting tracking and ability-based groupings, particularly when it comes to our math program. And so, again, as I said before, in just 1 year into the Calculus Project, we are already seeing, some of our equity work in disrupting some of these disparities come to fruition. So moving on to our next priority area, belonging and psychological safety. Kelly Greenwood, who is the founder of Mindshare Partners, a nonprofit organization changing the culture of workplace mental health, says we really need to think about mental health as being the next frontier of DEI, because mental health and DEI are not mutually exclusive. Belonging is all the ways in which we make every individual feel accepted, valued, and connected as members of this school community. Some emerging themes from my roundtable discussions. Number 1, we have to make belonging a conscious effort. Being diverse and equitable will never be enough if our schools don't foster trust, inclusion, and a sense of psychological safety that allows our educators and staff, students, and even our parents and guardians to feel like they belong in our community. For example, providing a safe and inclusive space for our Muslim students to observe their Islamic prayers during school hours is just one way to make belonging intentional in our schools. Number two, we have to create opportunities for students to establish stronger relationships with their peers through a home-based like initiative at CCHS. Middle school parents, if you're familiar with home-based, it's very similar to homeroom. Students at the high school spoke a lot about designing something like that at the high school level. Again, that's an opportunity for our students at the high school level to build stronger relationships, not only between their peers, but also with, a trusted adult that they can go to before they start going into their classes in the morning. We have to continue. Number three, we have to continue to leverage the peer assessment data. So to provide students with tangible strategies and resources to help them regulate their emotions and improve their social interactions. Supports for students who are transitioning due to their gender identity or expression, students who are who have experienced loss or trauma, physical and or emotional, including racial trauma from racism and microaggressions, all need social emotional supports to ensure that they feel emotionally safe when they are in our schools and in our classrooms. Some direct quotes from my DEI roundtable discussions. Number one, I feel there's no sense of safety at school for me. Students assume that if you know too much about queer issues, that you are gay, or assumptions are placed on you and what your sexual orientation might be. I feel only connected to students who are of a similar racial identity as me. High school just feels transient. Our students are here and then they're gone. We need to prioritize student connectedness, and it needs to be organic. Moving on, student engagement. Student voice must be a priority if we want students to feel like they matter. We have to establish common spaces for students to come together, to lend their voice through advocacy so that they are able to make the changes they want to see in their schools and beyond their schools in their communities. Number two, we have to create cross-cultural and immersive learning opportunities for students, such as visiting historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, as a post-secondary option for our students, not just our Black students, but all of our students. In addition to taking a field trip to diverse neighborhoods and cultural sites in Boston. If my good friend Chris Gauthier, social studies teacher at the high school, was here this evening, he will tell you that HBCUs especially have a rich, very rich civil rights and social justice legacies that can expose our students to a different learning environment and cultural experience that is very different from their experience here in Concord and in Concord Public Schools. In addition, cross-cultural experiences in general can help students to become even more empathetic and compassionate individuals who value diverse perspectives in a world that is increasingly becoming more diverse. Number three, we have to encourage students to form affinity groups. Affinity groups is one effective way to foster belonging in our schools. A lot of parents I met with were very, very appreciative about the fact that our middle school and high school really empower and encourage students to form clubs and student organizations. All you need is a faculty advisor. Some direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. Are there inclusive spaces for Muslim students to pray privately during school hours? Are we safe to embrace our gender identity and sexuality publicly if and when we come out? We need to learn different cultures and ethnicity. Don't assume that a kid from Boston does not have involved and responsive parents who care as much about their child and their education as white or Asian families do in Concord and Carlisle. Family and community engagement. How can we ensure that we are learning from families in ways that support them to help shape the work and embrace it? Some emerging themes from my roundtable discussions. Number one, we have to develop and communicate professional development opportunities to the parent community. Number two, we have to create opportunities for Boston, Concord, and Carlisle students and families to establish relationships, long-standing, lasting relationships. And then number three, we have to ensure families, especially families of color, are included, not as an afterthought, in all school and community-related events. One particular parent shared with me how, for example, we should think about the times we hold parent conferences or late afternoon and evening athletic events. She goes on to say that some Black and Latino parents especially are more likely to work the type of hourly jobs that would cause them to lose much needed pay or even risk losing their employment altogether in order to stay involved in their child's education and be available to attend nightly events for their child. Some direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. There needs to be more integration of the MECO program in our community. The schools and the PTG needs to consider the needs of families of color in our towns when they plan events. Elementary students are identifying earlier with their gender identity and expression. We need more training. How do we alleviate the pressure from teachers so that the work of educating our kids and the community is a collaborative effort between teachers and parents? Diversity in hiring. If we say we are committed to diversity, then representation of racially and ethnically diverse educators need to matter as well. At a time when students of color account for over 50% of school-age children in our public schools nationwide, more than 80% of their teachers are white. Students of color with teachers of the same racial identity are less likely to develop negative attitudes about school, are more likely to be referred to gifted programs, such as the Calculus Project, and more likely to complete high school and go on to college. Some emerging themes from my roundtable discussions. Number one, in an effort to achieve greater parity between students of color and educators and their educators and staff of color, our district continues to prioritize hiring ethnically diverse educators and staff in teaching positions across our district. Number two, we are working on creating hiring incentives for attracting more educators of color to Concord Public Schools and Concord-Carlisle High School. This is an effort currently underway with the teachers union at the high school, the CCTA. The CCTA has also created a DEI subcommittee that is looking at making recommendations to Dr. Hunter and the school committee about, again, how we incentivize our hiring process to recruit more diverse, more educators of color to our district. Number three, we have to actively support our educators of color and our tutors through affinity groups. Even in a district like Concord that has every intention of being diverse, equitable, and inclusive, sometimes the reality is we fall short to retain our educators of color, or really any employee for that matter, because they don't feel supported or that they don't feel like they belong in our schools. So some direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. There's a lack of diversity in counseling, in the counseling department. Students of color need more counselors who look like them. It feels like we work in silos. It is impacting our culture and our staff isn't diverse enough. Nationally, Concord is not immune to the challenges educational institutions are facing around diversifying their faculty. Let's look at Massachusetts, for example. Approximately 40% of public schools in approximately 40% of public school students in Massachusetts are students of color, while this is true for only 9.2% of public school educators and staff. This is based on the 2021 DESE Accountability Report. In comparison to Concord Public Schools and Concord-Carlisle High School, again, approximately 26% of our students are students of color, while this is true for less than 9% of our educators and staff of color. However, we have been making strides to improve this data. If you look on this chart right here, this shows a progression of how intentional we have been in diversifying our educators, our faculty, and staff. Particularly this school year, over 30%, and actually we are close to 40% at this point, of all new hires this school year, this 2021-2022 school year, were educators of color that we hired, okay? And this is, again, this is a progression. This is from 4 years ago when we really started to look at how we diversify our staff, and each year that number has increased. So again, we are making very intentional decisions in how we recruit, hire, mentor, and retain our educators of color. So in terms of the impact on our hiring efforts, I took a snapshot from our equity surveys. 81% of students from the class of 2021, so students that graduated in the spring, said their school should hire more faculty of color. This is compared to a little over 70% of parents and guardians, current parents and guardians, who shared the same sentiment. Institutional accountability. Accountability in this work requires action, and action requires leadership. Parents, students, educators, and staff are looking to our school leaders, our school committee, our superintendent, our administrators, to model and affirm our core values in DEI and anti-racist action. They want to hear directly from their principals, from their superintendent, from the school committee, about how we collectively sustain this work. As one stakeholder said to me, administration has a lot of power to make changes, and they do. Some emerging themes from our roundtable discussions. Number one, we have to hold ourselves accountable. To hold ourselves accountable, we must be able to identify what our collective vision is in this work and show measurable and tangible evidence of how our DEI goals and initiatives are going to benefit stakeholders in our school community. Perhaps it is an annual climate survey that tracks what folks' sense of inclusion and belonging are in our schools. Perhaps it is showing examples of how we are actively closing achievement and opportunity gaps in our district. Perhaps it is how we are increasing representation of ethnically diverse educators and staff year after year and across teaching and leadership positions across the district. Or perhaps it is showing examples of how teachers are incorporating culturally responsive teaching practices to meet the needs of historically marginalized students. Number two, we have to develop a plan to respond to hate and bias motivated incidents equitably across our schools. One stakeholder said they feel that there is an insufficient amount of time spent addressing homophobic incidents compared to race-based incidents in our schools. Number three, we have to ensure timely and transparent communication and outcomes about hate and bias motivated incidents. This was echoed by not only parents, but by students and educators in our school community. One particular stakeholder said, parents are only able to address hate and bias motivated incidents when their children, with their children at home, if there's timely and transparent communication provided by school administrators. And then number four, we have to provide professional development opportunities on restorative justice framework. One stakeholder said, what is the goal of discipline if it is not reparative? Holding the offender accountable for their actions, repairing the relationship they have harmed, and reintegrating them back into the school or the community is the goal of restorative justice practice. Some direct quotes from my roundtable discussions. I'm going to share one with you. The first one, we need PD, professional development, to learn more about a bias reporting tool. How would we use a bias reporting tool? Who would fill it out? What would be the outcome of decisions and consequences? How will we measure its accuracy and effectiveness? Again, I went back and looked at some equity survey data, and here's a snapshot. 72% of current families and 80% of students from the class of 2021, again, students who have graduated back in the spring, said they do not know the formal procedures on how incidents of hate and or bias are handled in their schools. However, both current families and students from the class of 2021 felt that their schools would respond appropriately if they were to report, and I quote, racial harassment or discrimination. So again, this is directly from our equity surveys. So what are the next steps in our DEI strategic planning process? What are we going to do with this information and the information to come in the equity survey data? Author Yujima Ulo, who is the author of So You Want to Talk About Race, I'm sure many of you are familiar with her book, says, the truth is we live in a society where the color of your skin still says a lot about your prognosis for success in life. This is the reality right now, and ignoring race will not change that. We have a real problem with racial inequity and injustice in our society, and we cannot wish it away. We have to tackle this problem with real action, accountability, and we will not know what needs to be done if we are not willing to talk about it. So let's get a little uncomfortable. The role of leadership from the school committee, from Dr. Hunter as our superintendent, to the admin team, to department chairs, supervisors, to set the tone for this work is essential to defining for everyone in our school community why this work is important, the value in which this work brings to our schools, and the impact it will have on all of us. We have to leverage our external stakeholders equally as we do with our internal advocates who work across our schools to advance this work. And so really, as I am ending this presentation, as I was putting together this presentation rather, and summarizing all of my DEI roundtable discussions, I really started to think about what are some tangible goals that we can focus on as we endeavor through the school year and into the next academic year. And so number one, and there are 10 goals here. Number one is, in the coming months, as I said before, I am going to, and actually before we get started on drafting a strategic plan, I will interpret, then present both the quantitative and qualitative equity survey data that we have since received from our two consultants, Dr. Khalees Warnham and Dr. Carol Blake. This data, along with the information that I have presented to you this evening, will inform our vision, initiatives, and goals for our long-term strategic plan on DEI and anti-racist action. Number two, I will call upon some of the individuals from my roundtable, from my DEI roundtable discussions to serve on a DEI strategic planning committee. The committee will be tasked with drafting our strategic plan on DEI. They are going to review the emerging themes and priorities that I have identified in my presentation this evening, in addition to looking at the data from the equity survey to inform our strategic plan on DEI. Number three, many in our school community do not know this, but our school committee is preparing to participate in professional development that is focused on DEI and anti-racism. The school committee is making this commitment. The professional development opportunity is being provided by the Ideas organization, also known as Initiatives for Development, Equity, and Achievement for Students. They are currently housed under the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. The school community's role in this professional development opportunity is to build capacity amongst their membership and leverage their understanding to advance and influence our collective work in DEI and anti-racist action in our district. Number four, I am going to collaborate with faculty who serve as advisors to the various student clubs and organizations. The council, this advisory council will engage specifically with student representatives of DEI-related clubs and organizations with the goal of collaborating together with a single vision in mind that guides their collective work and advocacy in DEI. Number five, since the start of the winter, I have been working very closely with our pre-K through 12 Cultural Competency Committee, in addition to our school committee's DEI subcommittee, to develop an anti-racist framework. The goal of this framework is to define what it means to be an anti-racist educator or school district and provide essentially a roadmap for any student, any parent, educator, or staff's journey in this work, no matter where they are on the continuum of becoming an anti-racist themselves. So more to come on that work. Number 6, in addition to develop this anti-racist framework, I am personally going to empower and work with the school committee to issue an anti-racism resolution. We have to understand that anti-racism, we have to center anti-racism at the heart of our shared DEI vision and agenda. And here's why. If we are unwilling to stand by our values in this work, to define what our district's commitment to change and at what lengths we are willing to go to see this work through, we will fail to sustain this work for the long term. And as I quote from Sandra Harbert Petrolionis, who is a professor of English and American Studies at Penn State, she says, Concord, Massachusetts has gone into the historical record as an anti-slavery hotbed, largely through the words and deeds of Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. In addition to the women I referenced before my presentation, Mary Wilder, all 3 of these individuals spoke aggressively against slavery right in this town of Concord. That is the kind of anti-racism history that exists in our town. And I think we should learn and embrace it and help define what our vision is for this work. Number 7, we have to embed belonging in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Being wholly accepted and included by those around you in our school community remains one of our district's priorities in this work. Number 8, I will finalize my DEI budget to reflect our values in this work. Number 9, I will submit a strategic plan. The goal in all of this is at the end to submit a strategic plan on DEI to Dr. Hunter, our superintendent, and the school committee as we begin the 2022-2023 school year. And then last but not least, my goal is to organize a DEI anti-racism summit. And that is because I want to identify other levers of influence that exist beyond the walls of our schools, such as parent organizations like CORE, our local faith-based organizations, the town's DEI commission, the League of Women Voters, to really come together to advance a shared vision for what this work means in our community. The goal of this anti-racism summit will be to build community, to build consensus, and share best practices that operationalizes this work of DEI and anti-racism beyond our schools. So again, I appreciate everyone for their undivided attention. I know that was a lot of information to digest, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or comments that you may have. I have included some additional resources on my presentation here. If you go on our district website, right at the top, there's a tab there that is dedicated to DEI. There's a lot of information there. The equity survey presentation that we received from Dr. Khalees Warnham and Dr. Carol Blake, which they presented on last winter to the school committee, is linked here. And then if you go to this last website, Very Well Mind, this is probably one of the best websites that I have seen that clearly explains what anti-racism is all about. So again, thank you everyone for your undivided attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. This is my second time seeing, although a slightly different version, there's new information here, so you threw me for a loop because I was just processing what we had seen last week. And, so now I've got new stuff to add to it, but thank you. Just want to go around and ask if any school committee members have any questions or comments. I can go first. Okay.
I'd love to go first. Andrew, I feel like you and I have been talking about this so much, so I feel very thoroughly prepared. I really want to thank you for a thorough presentation, something that's been available to the community. If people weren't here tonight, this school committee meeting is recorded. I think it's important for people that aren't in the room or aren't on the Zoom call to watch the presentation because it really It was excellent, and I think extremely thorough. It illustrates the work that you've done for us all year. And obviously this, as you said, it's a marathon. This is not a sprint. We are going to continue on in this work, and it's not going to happen overnight. But the only way we can do it is by doing it together. And I guess the three things that I really pull out from your presentation, and you say this all the time, which I feel like your voice is in my head, that all of this work is very intentional. It shouldn't just be, this is a new initiative at the district. It is intentional work. And when you're talking about having everyone be their true authentic self, it's important for our students. It's important for our educators. Everyone should come to work or to school every day, just being who they are and who they want to be. And then just, the concept of belonging. And at the bottom of everything we do, everyone needs to feel like they belong. So I appreciate the effort on this. I'm looking forward to the work. We've had many discussions about it in our subcommittee meetings. If anyone would like to join us, we'd love to have more discussion. And I think that we have some positives coming out of this. So thank you.
I'll go next. Yeah. Andrew, I came with several thoughtful questions, and you can't see them, but they're all X's through them because you answered them all in all of your additional comments that supported the presentation. But there was one that isn't so much a question, but just I'm wondering on your initiative number 8, where you talk about your budget. That's one thing, but building out a staff. I was encouraged to see you talking about that specifically, and I'm wondering, and I know that you're not quite in this part of the work yet, but do you see that as having like building-based representatives that become sort of your collaborators and your outreach? And I don't know, I hate the term boots on the ground, but I guess it sticks for a reason. Is that sort of what you're seeing there?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's more to come on this because I'm working with the CTA and the CCTA to gather some input on how to best frame what the support is going to be from a personnel standpoint. Because as you all know, I'm only one person, and so the added support beyond just me, beyond like Kristen, beyond our principals, and beyond Dr. Hunter, is going to be needed. And so what I've been looking at is really creating what I'm calling DEI teacher leads. And right. So the goal is to really draft a job description and share it out to all of our educators across all of our schools, and really be in a place where I can essentially hire a teacher who is culturally competent and really is dedicated in influencing this work and advancing this work in their school, right? So we have 6 schools in our district. So essentially I'm going to need 6 DEI teacher leads to support me in this work in their schools. I won't get too much into what the position is going to entail, because I'm currently working with the CTA and the CCTA to gather that input. Because, again, it's a lot of work, right? It's not just, it won't just be this DI teacher, looking at PD, right? They're going to be facilitating some conversations as well. They're going to be encouraging affinity groups to be developed. They're going to be part of hiring committees that are in their buildings. And so again, their work is going to be very intentional. And I just want to be mindful of the time that is going to be needed for a teacher to step into that role. And so more information. Great.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Because I think that a member of the public is unmuted, and maybe webinar can mute that person. All set.
Okay.
I'll take a turn if I may.
Yep.
Andrew, number one, of course, thank you. Thank you very much. And specifically, I think we benefited from a few different data sets that you added to the slides, which I believe really strengthen the cases that you're making for us. So thank you for that. I'll echo what Alexa said about the budget. We're in the throes of the fiscal 23 budget preparation, so a deeper understanding of that budget through the quote-unquote DEI budget lens would be useful, so that we know where the resources lie and whether they are going to be adequate. I believe that your next steps are going to be at some point very soon embedded in the larger strategic plan, so I look forward to that. I'm sure my colleagues do as well. And I believe that your reference to PD around bias reporting is something that should be considered a time-sensitive priority as well. So I hope we can come back to that one in the near term. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Court. And I think, as you heard from many of our Boston resident families during public comment, they also echoed the need to devise a plan on how we respond to hate and bias motivated incidents. And I think, you know, in my conversations with folks in the community, you know, there's split consensus in terms of whether or not an incident reporting, a bias incident reporting tool would be, you know, I don't want to use the word beneficial, but let's just say there's a lot more discussions to be had to really get folks to understand how we would effectively use a bias reporting tool in our school community. But I certainly do echo your sentiments and wanting to have more conversations about that.
And if I heard you correctly last week, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you heard that not everybody is aware of the tools and policies that we have in place right now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If I may just add one last thing in regards to my budget, here's what I'll say, and it's this: not many DEI directors that I know of in our, you know, across our neighbors, across towns here in Massachusetts, have a dedicated budget that support their work. And so I want folks to know that my current DEI budget was approved and supported by the school committee and Dr. Hunter and Jared Stanton, who's our assistant superintendent of finance and operations. So I'm very grateful to have a budget that I can work with. And those DEI teacher leads that I spoke briefly about are included in that budget. So again, I'm very grateful, and I think it's important folks know that my DEI budget is fully supported by members of the school committee, including Dr. Hunter and Jared Stanton. So thank you.
If I may, first of all, I want to say thank you to Andrew. I have attended many of the listening sessions and open table sessions with him in the lead, and I appreciate the very candid and open discussions. I know that special education parents were particularly grateful for having an opportunity to participate and be listened to. My question so thank you again. And then my question to Andrew is, what can we do to institutionalize some of the work that you are doing currently? Example, building some of those affinity groups, mentoring groups that maybe with PTG or any other organizations. So next year there is a structure, there is a go-to person for our families to go to.
Yeah, I think, you know, thank you for the question, Ava. I think what you're getting to is, you know, I'm specifically with the DEI, the strategic give me 1 second to go back on my presentation here. Particularly with the strategic planning committee, right? They're going to be tasked with helping me draft that strategic plan for our district, right? But the goal of that committee is to going into the next school year is to actually fold that committee into a DEI advisory council that is going to comprise of parents, students, an administrator, school committee member, very similar to how our current school advisory councils function. And so there's going to be sort of a central committee that a lot of these discussions around affinity groups, around mentoring and hiring and recruiting, a lot of these conversations are going to happen within this council. And they're going to be tasked to really, again, take on some of these big goals and initiatives and ensure that they are actually being implemented in our schools. And so that's sort of how I'm thinking of structuring the way in which we from an advisory committee, for example, and the way in which we help all of our schools really implement some of these initiatives that are to come.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Andrew, I just want to say thank you so much. This has been an incredibly thorough presentation. And it's very clear just how much work has gone into this at this point. And this is just phase one of 4 and many more. So thanks for so much incredible work here. I wanted to say that I love the inclusion of belonging to DEI work. I think that ought to be at the core of who we are as a community and our culture. So I really like that inclusion and I like that language a lot. And lastly, I look forward to the training that we as a committee are going to be doing. I think that's an important first step that we can do, at least for myself. And I look forward to being a partner to you in all of your work, both through each of these phases and then in the long term. So thanks for everything. And I look forward to partnering with you.
Thank you, Carrie. Look forward to meeting in person.
Yeah, likewise.
So Andrew, thank you so much for this thorough presentation. It's a lot to digest, and I haven't had the privilege to have seen it before, and I didn't have a lot of time to spend with it before the meeting, unfortunately. So I have to sort of digest this. It's a lot. That's the only thing I feel like we have to be careful to just not to do too much and perhaps focus in on some things that are really at the core of some of the work we need to do, like you said, intentional. So I think I want to thank my colleagues on the DEI subcommittee. I know they've been working toward this presentation today. I think I still feel like we have a lot of work to do. I think everybody agrees. And I just think we have to be, there's a lot of things on our educators' plates, and we just have to balance this all out and have a successful journey. So I just think we have to continue to be careful and mindful of how we can squeeze this in a school year and be successful, because as you know, this year's almost over. It doesn't feel that way, but it's just, there's not a lot of time. So I think we have to be intentional about how we then structure this work the next year. That's the only thing I'll ask of the DEI subcommittee, especially the school committee work, right? So I've heard a lot of mention of policy, and I want to know how we would have an equity lens on all of our policies. So I personally, as a school committee member, don't know how to do that. So I would need some training on that. But thank you. Much work to come.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, you are only one person, but we are very lucky that we have you in your entirety. I think one of our public speakers used the word fidelity, and I think that word has resonated with me all night. And I like how that ties into your statement that this should not look new, right? That this all should feel authentic. It should come from the community. We're lucky that we have you, who has been in the community for so long and comes into this position with that font of knowledge, that those experiences, those interactions that I think are absolutely critical to making this work authentic and to make sure that the work has a sense of belonging, right? So that the people who benefit from it really end up having a sense of belonging. So I just want to thank you for everything that, I've enjoyed being a part of the DEI subcommittee and getting to know you better, and just appreciate your work more and more every time I see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Can I just address something that Cynthia has mentioned, the policy with the lens on diversity, inclusion, and equity? I just wanted to say that in this, Court can speak to that, in our policy subcommittee, we already started doing that work. I remember looking at the policy around the buses and actually sitting there with our administrators and really carefully looking how this policy would be affecting students coming from Boston. What can we do to make sure that we are sensitive to their needs as well? So that work has already started, and the policy subcommittee was not waiting, hit the ground running, as the needs of the students are already there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that 2 out of 3 of us on policy also sit on DEI, and that's purposeful, and so it does always come up in our discussions.
All I'm saying is I don't have a more,
well, we don't have a blueprint for it, other than to pause and say, and ask each other, what are the equity implications? What are the equity issues that might get touched by this policy? Just to try to pause for those questions and answers.
Maybe I'm saying something that, if the policy subcommittee could come with that information when we discuss the policies, this whole committee, you know what I'm saying? That what you have to.
So let me jump ahead. What I'm hearing you say is when the policy subcommittee brings you something, add to it information about the nature of our discussion vis-a-vis equity. If that's what I'm hearing, I think we would be happy to do that.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that in some of our training, we will explore some of that also.
Yes.
How, should we be looking at our policies? So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. 8:30.
Yes.
We'll continue on right now onto the warrant article. Can we take a 5-minute break, maybe?
Sure.
5 minutes? Yes. Okay, thank you.
You all better eat my
5-minute
cookies.
recess?
5-minute recess. Anybody in the public, have yourself a cookie. All right, hi, welcome back. Thank you for staying around. And we are now resuming our March 8th joint Concord-Carlisle School Committee meetings. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. And we are on to discussion C, Concord Finance Committee public hearing warrant articles. Jared, take it away.
Share my screen here. So I'm going to be very quick. What I'm going to do is basically just sort of point out some of the changes that were made from the January 11th meeting, and what I'm going to be presenting to the FinCom on Thursday night. I will be. This is still in a way a draft. We are putting it into the blue format, and here we go. So there was no change in the budget timeline. So I'm just going to really fly through and let you know some of the changes. As you know, right now, our budget is $36,541,807, which is $174,172 under the Concord Finance Committee guideline. Sorry. So one of the things that I need to point out, if you're comparing this slide to the one in January, as you know, a lot of things have changed. There's also some footnotes that I had on the January slide that I took out of this because they're really not relevant anymore. They were relevant to the school committee's discussion, but not the discussion that we're going to be having with the FinCom. So a couple things that may have, that you may remember that has changed since the January 11th meeting. The first one is we had the DEI director as a 0.6 in the January 11th meeting. That was about $85,724. Since that time, we reduced that to a 0.4, which was about $54,149. So that impacted a few different drivers. That impacted the teachers' drivers and impacted the admin salary drivers. So if you try to do the apples to apples comparison without that slide that I actually presented on January 18th, you won't be able to. And I'm happy to go into that further, later this week if you send Dr. Hunter an email. So that was really the biggest driver change, teachers and the admin. Also, it's really important to know all of our offsets in this budget are only general fund offsets. There are no salary offsets to grants that are included in these numbers. The ones for tuitions in the budget, we include an offset in the budget. That's why the tuitions are showing as a decrease. And when I go into the offsets, you'll see that. There were no changes on the cost savings. FTEs, a couple quick things. I did transpose a few, 2 lines. It was the drivers and the principals, so I did switch that. In addition, the salaries at the top for the teachers, these now include longevity and stipends. When I was redoing this, I probably should have looked exactly at the chart that I used before, but I redid everything, always trying to improve it. So a couple of the numbers may look a little bit different. First being the salaries, they do include the longevity and the stipends. Also the drivers. The drivers include the athletic transportation drivers, which does not have any FTEs. I did not include it before, but I included it this time. So the 495,000 is actually an increase of around 95,000. That's only because I included the athletic drivers line that you'll see in the general fund budget. So that's why the FY22 budget looks like it increased by quite a bit. That's pretty much the main reason for that. No changes in the grant and revolving offsets. There was a bit of a change here in the circuit breaker. We went up $35,235 as part of our recommendation to get to the original guideline. Therefore, our tuition offsets increased. No changes in the tuition numbers. No changes in our E&D. No changes in the retirement or OPEB or transportation or health insurance. Debt stayed the same. CARES Act again stayed the same. ESSER 3 stayed the same. Transportation might be 2 times there. Okay, I'll change that. Okay, so I included a couple of slides actually for the capital article for the repaving and the lighting. One of the things I think it's really important that we stress, and here's a quote here from the Concord town manager. We've performed the field review of the pavement condition of the access road and estimated that the pavement condition index, I gotta switch that, lies in the range of 40 to 55, which is considered poor in the system we currently use for the town's public streets. The estimated costs were $1,053,665. The school committee voted to use 200 to reduce that amount by 200,000 using the capital stabilization account. Therefore, the capital article is for $853,665. I've also included some pictures, pretty self-explanatory here. This is the Thoreau Street entrance. Here's the front of the BD Center. Here's the Walden Street entrance.
These are the new pictures, right?
These are new, and I actually got a few today that I did not include that I can send over to you and put it into the presentation for Thursday, because now that the snow is gone, it's showing quite a bit more, believe it or not. Right on this, the picture right here on the right.
If you look back at some of the older pictures, I'm sure there's been even more degradation than when this was originally proposed. It could be an idea to put in, like, this is how bad it was when we first thought we needed, and like, this is how bad it's gotten, right?
Yeah.
What's going to happen if we wait longer? Because that's really what we need people to think about.
Right.
And since this is a dry run for town meeting, will we have two separate presentations for the articles?
Yeah, you'll have a separate presentation for town meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just sort of,
We can
the
update.
hearings are supposed to be town meeting presentations.
Yeah, no,
so-
they're expecting separate ones for each.
Yeah.
Each
Oh, for
operating
town-
budget,
yeah,
each
yeah.
capital.
I mean, for the hearing on Thursday.
Yep.
Right, yeah. And can we just provide a little more detail about paving versus lighting and how much those cost? Those, not the whole spreadsheet with every little, but
Sure.
just, a
High
couple
level.
more. And a question might come up with this. So who's doing the lighting versus the paving? Like the town are they going to take care of everything, or?
We'll bid it all out, but
Okay.
I'm sure the lighting will be separate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jared, does this come out of is the $200,000 just from the school committee budget, or is the whole project paid for out of the school committee?
So the $200,000 is coming out of the stabilization account.
Yeah.
And then the 853 will be assessed to the two towns probably over 10 years.
Okay.
Yes. So
Pending approval.
As
Pending
a little
approval.
background, at the end of last fiscal year, so May of 21, Jared had recommended that we had the possibility to put some money towards a stabilization fund. And at that time, we had a robust conversation about what could we use the money for, because we didn't want to hold money without a purpose, right? But at the same time, we knew that there were some big ticket items coming down the line, especially this one. And so we had voted at that time to, in fact, utilize the money into a stabilization fund. And we still are not comfortable with holding stabilization money for long periods of time, because it's money we've been entrusted with. We should use it for our students. The money that we are given should go to a purpose. And this is what we think is a valid
The overall
purpose.
expense doesn't come from the town at all. It's just from the school's budget.
No.
Okay,
We put the 200,000.
It is town, okay,
Yeah, so we put the 200,000 to offset the total, because the total is a little over $1 million.
Yeah.
Right? And so in order to have a less high warrant article be presented at the town meetings, we
offsetting.
decided to
Got it.
use that
Okay.
200,000 to
That makes
offset it, to reduce it down to the 800-ish. That will then be divided between Carlisle and Concord on a proportional basis to our enrollment.
Got it. Okay.
And it's also important to stress, not only does it have to pass a town meeting, it has to pass at the ballot as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And has to pass at both town meetings.
Both.
true.
Yeah. So the way that it works too, Carlisle was actually first this year. If it doesn't pass in Carlisle, then it's.
It won't pass to them. Okay.
But it is something, no matter what, that we're going to have to do. We're going to keep patching it, but at some point, it's just, we're going to have to figure it out.
Yep. Yeah.
Just some last Walden Street entrance pictures. So the general fund estimates, two things changed here. We increased chapter 70 by approximately 312,000, and chapter 71, which is the regional transportation, we increased that by 50,000. So our total revenue went up 362,000 based on the governor's budget. And just so you know, that comes out the fourth Wednesday of January. Here's just an updated revenue chart. And then lastly, the final assessments. And again, we are $174,172 under the Concord Finance Committee budget guideline. So what I'll do is I will continue to turn this into the format that the town wants and make sure it's separated by the two articles.
Great.
Jared, could you go back to number 6 for a moment, please? I want to anticipate the drivers getting flagged by FinCom, 3 people at something approaching $500,000. 2 questions. One, how do we apportion driver FTEs across the 2 districts? Where does 3 sit within the larger pool of employees? And then secondly, I think we should be ready to distinguish between school runs and all of the extracurricular to help people understand that. Otherwise, they'll get thrown by that, I think.
Sure. Yep. So we do have a slide that we break out exactly how we break it out based on the runs. So I'll absolutely be able to answer that. And then we also have about 95,000, give or take, that we have for athletic runs that was actually level funded this past year.
When that gets identified, I think people will be reassured. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
When you guys are, just so I'm not like a total ignoramus, when you guys are talking about runs, you're talking about like the bus running from A to B?
Yeah.
Got it, okay, just
Yeah,
making
sorry.
sure.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Making sure. That's what I thought.
So yeah, we
There are
break
runs
out
for the track team too.
Yep, yeah, whatever, I'm just making sure.
we break out, the high school runs.
Yep, okay. Just in the event.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, it looks like a lot, the budget drive, the difference, right? That's what you were saying?
It'll catch
their
people's
eye.
attention if they don't have background, yes.
Right, but it's a 3.5% increase, and so a big chunk of that is just attributed to the COLAs.
Yeah.
As it is, right? So it's just probably a good thing to remember that you're adding 4 you're adding a little over, you're adding 3 FTE, 3 and change FTEs, right? And the 23.7 to 20.
But I thought these 2 figures would catch people's attention without some explanation for drivers specifically.
The 15,000 difference?
3 FTEs with a number of $490,000 next to it.
That's the request.
Exactly, and so the point I was trying to make was that
for
will
the-
require some clarification, because people will do FTE division and come up with the wrong conclusion about what it constitutes.
Yep, that's the straight
principles.
salaries.
That's the principles. You might be looking at, what we got email?
Yeah,
It's
Court, it's been changed. That's the one I caught. Those 2 numbers, the categories are transposed there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought I'd pulled this from a link, but.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. This is
I caught that.
This is.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, there were some lines that were changed.
Yeah, I know I'm sorry. When you said that, I thought I was looking at the changes.
It's not 3 drivers for.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
That will make things clearer. I still stand by I think that it's worth pointing out the 3.5% increase.
Yes, yeah.
Given that you're adding
Clearly,
FTEs and most of it is COLA related. It's
And the biggest driver is the special ed tuitions.
okay. Great.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
Okay, so facility fee policy. We have come back to this, and my idea for tonight was just to talk about, right now, given that we know that there are going to be no increases, we've already committed to no increases until after September 1. Do we think that we have a conversation about, it seemed that there needed to be some kind of conversation eventually at the board level about our general thoughts on facility use, on community, right, on what we envision as the purpose of the use of the facilities, right? To what extent, and I think, I mean, looking back through some of the old policy subcommittee meetings, I got the sense from the 3 policy subcommittee members, right, that there was kind of a commitment to the idea of that we, you know, we're not trying to we want to be useful to the community with our facilities, right? We don't want to jeopardize our facilities in any way. We need to protect our facilities, and but overall, we welcome community use of the facilities. Is what I got from right from so. I don't know if right now is the time to have a good night.
Good night. Thanks
for coming.
A deep dive into any of these things, or if right now we stay just sort of, do we, you know, is this a pressing issue that needs to be dealt with right now? Or do we just put it on pause for a little bit and come back to it at some later point when
My only concern is it's firmly in the public's awareness. That would be my chief concern with putting it on hiatus, just because it's received some attention at the public level. And I think there's, I don't know, I don't see, I understand that there's no specific urgency because we've decided to table implementation of new fees and a new policy until September 1st. But apart from that, I wouldn't see it necessarily a good reason to table it.
And I guess sitting on policy, the policy committee, we spent an extraordinary amount of time talking about this. So I thought we were going to come tonight and just talk about what our intention of the policy is, because I think that discussion needs to happen. We've had a lot of discussion about fees, but the actual intention and community use, and when you go back to, Dorothy's recommendation to us at the policy level was to look at what is the goal, and you have to come to consensus as a committee as to what the goal is. Is it for the community to use the facility? And we have to decide as a committee what that is. And this is, I went back through agendas, I went back through policy subcommittee meetings from, 2 years. And I think at some point we need to move on past this and, take a recommendation and vote on it, because I do feel like tabling it again, then we're saddling a future committee with this because we can't come to consensus. There was a clear pause. There was definitely, it came to committee in 2020. None of us knew a pandemic was going to happen. There was a clear pause. And so I'm just concerned that we're not going to move forward on this. So I think we have to decide what is our intention if it's coming to the committee level.
I don't think we're talking about right now if it's coming to the committee level. I think we're just trying to figure out what are we doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing right now?
Right.
You're jumping ahead of where does it belong? I don't know. I would love if policy subcommittee had a consensus on, that you wanted to share and prompt a conversation at our level. And again, I don't know if tonight is the right night for it, right? Or if we say, okay, let's come up with, does policy subcommittee say, okay, we'll talk and say, this is what we envision as the goal and bring it? I mean, or maybe you guys are already.
I did send some document. I don't know if anyone looked at what I sent, of some options just for discussion. So are we discussing, or are we just going? I guess I'm confused as to, where we're going right
Well, I
now.
don't think we're not voting on anything today.
no.
I don't think we're talking about any numbers today, because I think we've received some new information recently that, that helps us figure out a little bit more budget implications,
I felt like we needed, we ended up in policy that we needed more of clarity. What are the goals of this policy when it comes to increasing the fees? What is the purpose? So this way, we understand how we approach the fees and the policy itself. So it was definitely, we've spent a lot of time and discussions, and at some point, at least for myself, there was an evolution of thinking that it brought me to a place where I was asking myself, is the reason why I thought I was reviewing this policy is the correct reason that would be shared with, with everyone else on the committee. What is the goal? Are we to include more stakeholders that would be able to use the facilities? Are we, what is the purpose?
I'd be happy to speak to it. My opinion really hasn't changed over a number of years. I think we have a duty and an obligation to open up the schools to community use. I think it enriches community life in endless ways. I don't, frankly, personally consider that really debatable. I think that's our obligation. Where I think we have a secondary obligation that is no less important is to see that that happens while protecting the sanctity of the school day for the educational program. And I think we've been able to do both for many decades. What prompted the review was the simple passage of time. 2009 was the last time we took a look at it. I would propose that we disabuse ourselves of the idea that this is a fundraising mechanism. Just put that aside. We have 3 tiers of users, which makes sense to me. One is our own internal use after hours, and we absorb those costs fully, whatever they are. Second one is locally based nonprofit organizations that are holding a nonprofit status and are here for some form of civic good. I believe those should continue to receive a fee that is very, very modest, but not so much that it is so wildly subsidized that we replace or supplant other facilities. It's not our primary mission, but it should be easy and attractive to those users, in my opinion. Where the term you've heard me use before, cost recovery, comes into play for me is I believe that outside groups and for-profit groups should be cost neutral to us. Now, this is endlessly difficult. If you open a door 20 times on a cold February day, how many boilers fire up on the roof that wouldn't otherwise? We're not going to know that. But we've got to make a reasonable effort to be, I think, cost neutral for those users. And cost neutral for the users not only relates to the use of the facility and the subsequent upkeep that's necessary, but also the personnel costs that are directly related to the use. That is building service workers, not a chunk of Jared's time or Kristen's time or anybody else's time, but rather just direct costs. I think that's a very defensible, responsible position for us. So I think that a reasonable guide is, number one, what are historically our fees? We have inherited those from 2009. Number two, what are surrounding districts doing? Because they do their homework as well. And then number three, the reasonable test. We ask, what does this mean in terms of costs that actually get assessed? Is this something that is going to be harmful to any one of those tiers of users, but notably the cost recovery users in that third tier, the outside groups? Because we want to be cost neutral, but not in such a way that we're a huge disincentive. But frankly, a large gym is not a cheap piece of real estate. It's not. A turf field is not a cheap piece of real estate. We have to recognize that. So I'm frankly comfortable with the guiding principles that we've been using. But in recent policy subcommittees, we did start to lose our sense of direction because there was a sentiment that we should pause and ask, is revenue generation even on the table here? I would propose to the answer should be no. When we look at the extensive use of that high school, it's used the better part of 365 days a year. No kidding, really is. To see a yield at the end of the year of a projected $20,000, I think would be very positive proof that we're not in the revenue generation business, because you'd be hard put to say that extra use of the high school has a burden less than $20,000 to the district. Probably it's quite a bit more.
I think I think that most of our discussions got hung up really on the field use that is very short. It's only the summer months, couple months in the summer. So that was the
There's some other use. Use across, but you can't charge them.
As I sort of think of this philosophically as we delve into what is in our purview and what is outside of our purview, in developing the policy itself, I first started questioning whether the recommendation of rates themselves, $100 here, $25 here, were in our purview. So I think that's sort of one question I have as to whether that should be under our direction at all. So that's sort of one question. And then the second part that I think is separate and apart from that is, and maybe this is under our purview, maybe it isn't, I think the part that I personally have trouble, I guess, with would be the classification of the rates. So who falls into those rates? Those tiers is what I mean. And so is that part of our purview? So, I mean, I think there are two parts of where I think, because to your point, I think there's broad consensus about the spirit of the policy. I don't think that is something, at least I think, no one really is here to debate. I think the part that becomes challenging is how we then enact the spirit of that. And I think that there are two pieces to that. One, how are we classifying the tiers of our users? And then the rates themselves. I feel like when I read things to the letter of the what our roles are, I think the rates themselves would potentially be outside of our purview. What I think is more potentially in our purview is how we would classify the rates themselves, or maybe they're all outside of our purview. I don't know if people have opinion on that.
So can I just interrupt? What is the purpose of the discussion tonight? Because we're getting back into the weeds.
We're getting back into the weeds.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm trying to, how do we?
Well, I mean, the problem is we fundamentally, we have some people, we have some members who think that we should vote on, we should package a policy, or I don't even, well, like, I mean, because you're bringing a new option in,
Sure.
which is that, I mean, I don't know if anybody, the document that we got that gave kind of a sample of the summer usage that we got last week from Aaron with the schedule of use from the different users, right? I know you guys have done a ton of work in terms of looking at different fees and schedules and stuff. I don't know if either of you dumped those into that document. I did, and I was very surprised that, as Jared said on the first policy subcommittee meeting, is we looked at the usage, and this would be a non-significant impact. Your originally proposed, which I noticed were actually reduced from some of them at least looked like they'd been reduced from the fees that were proposed back in 2020. Is that correct? Right, you guys actually revised them down. So when I looked at what our big users actually use, it did seem to, it agreed with what Jared had said, was that it was not a major impact. And so I was pleasantly surprised to have that new piece of information last week. So again, like, this is, so maybe that aligns with, that was a fine number to begin with, but as for where we are, I don't know, we keep spinning around, so I don't.
Well, I think that we have some things on the table that have been brought to us. The policy committee has looked at sample policies from other towns, and ours is modeled after another town, so we've looked at that. We've looked at multiple different fee schedules. We have a recommendation on the table from Dr. Hunter for email. So now, what are we going to do with it? Either we cut it off and continue on, we go back to policy, or we discuss it here. And I'm not certain what the right answer is on this. And so in looking at the agenda, when it says facilities fees, I didn't know what to expect, I'll be honest. So I'm not sure. I think we need a clear direction if we're going to talk about it at the committee level. Otherwise,
I'm happy to share my clear direction is we're not going to make, again, we're not making money off of this, right? We are just trying to collect some nominal amount for every hour of use, or you can do it by number of people, right? For multiplied by hours, because obviously if you have a group of 10 people renting a field versus a group of 100 people renting a field, there's a different impact there, right? But that becomes a whole logistical challenge for them to manage in the end. So my goal is to make sure that we have something that is equitable and transparent and dependable, right? Like that somebody who goes will not be surprised by a number. I would like to see less. I don't think that there's much difference. A lot of these fees, it's like $5 here, more, like $5 less. And right, for me, the issue is more the custodian fees and how are they applied, and is there kind of is there an equity there? That's a question that we haven't looked at, and I think that's the only question that's remaining for me.
What was your what did you perceive the objective of what were you hoping to get from the conversation tonight?
Well, what I put in the planning memo is that we were going to have an upper level conversation about would we continue the fee conversation right now, or would we pause it and wait as we close out this year and look at it with eyes anew and with the new business manager in the fall. That was nothing that's, yeah.
To pause or not to pause is the question.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was, sorry,
and I think
that was not clear.
I think that's what I wrote in the planning memo, was exactly that. Like, just, do we move forward, or do we take a break from it?
As a member of the policy subcommittee, I would like to get into more of the policies and not get stuck on this one. Because I think that it's been too long, and these are things, when I look at my role on school committee, it is all centered around student achievement, whether we're talking about budget, policy, or superintendent evaluation. And facilities fees, for me, doesn't fall into any one of those things. And so I actually question whether we should even, it feels very operational to me, which is not part of our role. But, I think we need to move forward somehow.
And Tracy, thank you for those comments. I don't see it as the same, but I do think that the policy committee, subcommittee, needs to move on and, get through some other much more student perhaps centered policies and things that we should be looking at. So I think I do want to revisit it, but we can have that conversation maybe anew this summer. So we can set the table and just see, once we've had a little distance from sort of going at it constantly. So that's what I think is we can maybe just have a sort of relaunch or something and make it clear in the beginning of if we even decide to take it back up, right? What we hope to accomplish.
So I just want to mention that, yes, it is a policy that in many districts is the low-hanging fruit. Most districts have not been looking at that policy for many, many years, and we did not either. Tracy has done a lot of research in this area, surveying the other districts. I do want to be working through this in the spirit of getting things moving, as we have many, many policies that are waiting. And I just want to remind the members that I will be coming up the region next year. So you will have a new member and you will be basically building this whole conversation all over again. So I don't know if it's time saving, if it could be a time saving situation if we give another week and go back to the table now that we understand a little clearer the goals of this policy.
I would urge us not to put it off beyond the summer. Our current policy doesn't even allow for groups that are outside.
Correct.
No, it definitely has.
Outside for-profits.
Oh, so
We're in violation of our own
Right.
policies and have been for over a decade. So I don't think we
that's a
should. I don't think we
surprise.
should
Okay.
push it off too much longer.
I mean, I would be willing as a policy committee to bring it back to policy, and we come back to this committee with a recommendation. We vote on something, we have an option, and the three of us work through that in a very specific amount of time, whether it's, 20 minutes of our policy meeting, and then the rest moves on to the next policies. Like, it has to be very specific, come ready, come with an option, and let's move on.
But in fairness to the full committee, once you bring a recommendation, we have to have a full-throated discussion, and it can go back. So it has to be very, clear. Right. So that I just want to be, so I don't want to set unreasonable expectations, but yeah. And I do think many districts that are regional, so town policies are very different when you don't have a region, because most of the fields are handled by the rec after. So, a region is different, and our town does manage the fields at the Concord Public Schools. So they're two different beasts. So that's why I said initially, I really think we need two separate policies, one for the region and one for Concord Public Schools, because I think the Concord Public School policy you could knock out, boom. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so is the consensus then that we will send it back to policy and they will meet next week? Is that what I'm hearing, or?
Well, next meeting, we haven't set a date.
Oh, I'm sorry, your next meeting, I'm sorry. Is that?
And what we can do
consensus?
is
Yeah.
decide where to prioritize this one and some other ones. I think but we know there's a sense that we're not going to delay this beyond the summer.
And again, I don't think they have to beat the fees in the policy. If there's an urgency to updating the policy itself so that we are in compliance.
I don't see that we're out of compliance when it says there's a substantial group of citizens will be benefited. I think that's deliberately vague, and when some of these for-profit organizations, I think, are generally comprised of nearly the entirety of them are citizens or are townsfolk or whatever.
Well, when it.
So I don't think we're out
Yes,
of compliance.
that's right.
I don't think there's urgency there.
Wait, what are you, which
She's
one?
reading number 7,
KF.
Civic.
metropolitan,
Substantial
civic,
portion. Okay.
educational.
Or I'm actually reading the second paragraph. Use of school buildings and other facilities by organizations will be permitted only when a worthy educational, civic, or charitable purpose will be served, or a substantial group of citizens from the community will be benefited.
Mhm.
I think
Okay, so
We
I
do
think.
have to give these organizations enough time to adjust.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, is that it, or do we have to have further discussion?
Can you pass along the email that I forwarded to the chairs, to the rest of the committee? Has that been sent out, the one with all the different options, just so when it does come back to full committee discussion, that people have the background if they have questions for discussion?
Okay, do you want it as it was with the different options, or do you want to,
I mean, I can look at it, but just generally, just background, because I think that
Oh,
what
yeah,
the committee is lacking is the background maybe, and especially Carrie's joining the committee, and she probably doesn't have any of the background, so maybe it might give a little bit of background, might
Is
be
this
helpful.
Policy subcommittee background or individual member background?
No, I sent an email, I sent an email back, I think right before vacation with those 4 different options and just things that I had learned and looking at other towns' facilities.
So I guess my point is,
Yeah.
wouldn't you funnel that through policy?
Yes.
Should we not funnel it through
Yes.
policy, or do we each?
That's why I wasn't sure what to do, because that's.
Advocate.
I
to the
didn't
full
know, because
committee?
I got your response, but I was just waiting on that. So I can share, we can just talk about that again at the beginning, I guess, of our policy meeting.
yeah.
Because I think
I think
anybody
that's
who
usually, I mean,
has,
that's how we do things with the DEI subcommittee, is, we channel and then you speak on behalf of any concern, right? Yeah.
people funnel it into a given subcommittee and then it comes back out again.
Yep,
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
right.
yep,
Okay.
okay. Let's see where we are.
I think
Do
we're
the
at-
votes? Oh, additional public comment, right?
Yep. If you are a member of the public and you wish to speak now, please use the raise hand feature. We don't have any more members of the public in person with us.
Okay.
Just note, and I do see Wendy Harriet.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I am a Boston parent, my co-parent, and I was actually hoping to be able to jump in after Andrew gave his presentation. Unfortunately, I think I missed that window of opportunity. I had a couple of questions. I'm assuming that the school committee is comprised solely of Concord residents?
Concord and Carlisle.
Concord and Carlisle. So you would have to obviously be a resident of Concord or Carlisle.
Correct.
Now, is that also the case for the school advisory committee? Because I think there was some mention during Andrew's presentation, or the advisory council.
I didn't know that.
I believe
That can be any parent.
I believe it's any parent.
His DI, he's.
Oh, the DI, yeah, that's not structured yet.
Oh, his-
exactly,
oh,
but
the-
I'm sure we're gonna want to
Yeah.
include Boston families.
Yeah.
But he did mention a school advisory committee. So I'm just kind of wondering what are the requirements for that? And I'm asking simply because
Parent, right?
obviously.
The
given
existing
that-
ones.
Yeah, we're still formulating all of this, but I'm sure it's going to be inclusive of
The
parents.
existing ones,
Oh,
the
these-
already.
the SAC.
The
Oh,
SAC
the
committee.
The
SAC.
formal ones.
Yeah, there's a.
Yeah,
so we
those
have
are
a-
parent.
Parent
We-
community, which we also.
Administrators.
Yes.
There's something called the SAC, which is the School Advisory Council,
Mhm.
right? Which is made up of parent representatives as well as, in Carlisle, there's also a member from the community
Should be
at
a member of
large.
the
Yes,
community
that's,
and the
that's,
staff
this is MGL.
and the
Right.
administration.
And that is open to any parent.
Yes.
Usually
Uh,
there's a process
There's a
of
process,
elections.
yeah. But any parent can
Yes,
be
of course.
be elected. onto it.
But any parent or community member could certainly contact the principal of their school.
Yes.
And inquire.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then in addition, Andrew is forming a different advisory committee
Mhm.
that will be focused specifically on DEI work in the immediate planning process. And that one is the one that Dr. Hunter spoke about that's in the formation right now,
Yeah.
and will include a broad range of parents, and there's nothing, there's
I mean, I
nothing.
have questions because the presentation that he made was great. But there are a couple of comments that I have, and I am joining with some of the others that went previously, in that, Medco has been in existence, the Medco program, for over 50 years. My son joined in 2011, somewhere around there. I have a nephew who went to Brookline, and some of what was discussed or presented are some of the very themes that we've heard for many years. And, it seems at this point, although we're hearing it and it sounds great, I just am wondering where we're going to get to a point where we're actually going to enforce some of this and not have it just be what we've been talking about, because all of the information that he presented as far as statistics, this is nothing new to the Concord community. Or I would probably go as far as saying some of the other communities around. There's nothing new. None of these statistics are new. We've all been aware that there have been these disparities. There have been, inequities in access. None of this is new information. So now having a sophomore getting ready to graduate when he came in the fifth, at the age of 5, in kindergarten, just makes me wonder how many years does it take for us to actually get to this. It was nice to hear from some of the students on the ski team. And, I was I think a little disheartened hearing that, because while it's great that they're, bused over to Weston every day, Boston parents, we don't have the same opportunities or access for our students who'd like to be involved in sports and other curricular activities. I mean, I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to actually allocate, some additional funding, or maybe just during the times when we have I think it's typically around a 3-month stench, where we have these sports and different programs that our students would like to be involved in, and have them be able to participate. I mean, at the very least, maybe have a commuter rail pass so they could actually take the commuter rail home and not have to pay out of pocket. These are some of the concerns that we as parents have. And while it's great to, I have to tell you that I was a little bothered, because my son just went through basketball this year and we had quite a struggle. And as you can imagine, having a 15-year-old on a train at night coming home by himself, because I'm not always able to pick him up, is not something that is, comfortable for a parent. So, as we talk about these things and we talk about, access, we talk about equity, we talk about opportunities, I just am wondering, even Andrew being formerly a MECO director, why are we not offering the same types of opportunities to these Boston students? This is not the first year this has been in existence. And it just feels like we're still talking about coming up with plans. We're talking about the strategic plan. And even as he mentioned a strategic plan, I'm still waiting to hear exactly what that's going to entail. So I think someone on the committee mentioned, not taking on too much, but we've known about some of this. So I think we do need to take on a lot, because it's been overdue. It's been long overlooked. It's been ignored for many years. So I don't want to inconvenience, and we're here to partner. We're not working against you, but I think to even say we don't want to take on too much is almost somewhat kind of, and I'm looking for the right word right now. It's like, are we really going to walk the walk we're talking, or are we just going to talk about it? Because if you say it's doing too much, well, it's been a lot. It's been a lot for a lot of us. And it's been many years that we've had this same information. We've known about these issues. We've expressed concerns. I'm not the first parent. I know there are parents that came before me, and there'll be parents after me. So at what point do we actually put our money where our mouth is? We end the talk and enforce the walk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, Wendy Harriet. We'll get her. Yeah.
I have her.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Aaron Fife.
Hi, my name is Erin Fife, and 174 Hill Street in Concord. And Wendy, thank you for your comments, because I was going to echo a lot of those, and I really appreciate that. My comment is that the data that really jumped out at me from Andrew's presentation was the response to the question, if I were to report racial harassment or discrimination at my child's school, I'm confident that my school would respond appropriately. Andrew reported that parents said overwhelmingly that they agree or strongly agree with that statement. However, most of the families in our district identify as white and would not have experience with reporting racial issues. And so the statements from Wendy and the parents at the beginning of this meeting sort of run directly counter to the findings of this particular question in the equity audit. And I'm concerned that we continue to not listen to the voices we should be listening to as we develop this DEI plan. I understand that Andrew, as we just mentioned, will be selecting sort of people to take part on this DEI strategic planning committee. And my question would be, how are members of the committee going to be selected in an equitable manner to make sure that the voices of all parents, including the METCO parents, are included, and parents of other historically marginalized people in our community. And then my final question is just, will we have any more public dialogue around the results of the equity audit? As Wendy said, we were all sort of hoping to throw some more comments in after the end of Andrew's presentation. And I know this is not a forum for dialogue, but I would be interested to know, as we get I know that Andrew said he would be sorting through the equity data survey, but I would like to know, is there room for public discussion of that data as it comes through? Because I think we can all look at that data in different ways and have it inform our work in different ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Elizabeth Frank.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Frank. I'm at 1283 Elm Street in Concord. And I also wanted to thank Wendy and the other Boston parents that spoke earlier tonight, and just really grateful for their comments and for their showing up. One of my points was just to consider prioritizing when we talk about DEI, prioritizing race and racism and having the other things being more secondary. I'm concerned that it's very important to have LGBTQ and disabilities recognized and accepted as well, but I'm concerned that those might be a little easier to focus on for white people than actual race and racism, and just really wanting that to be at the center of the DEI and kind of have the others maybe on the periphery. I think one of the other parents might have mentioned this, but the idea of having a non-voting Boston parent on the school committee, I think would be huge. It could be a non-voting seat, but just to have the actual representation in the room or via Zoom to really have these people, have them be represented better. And then I would also suggest, is there any way, given the comments that they've shared, to accelerate implementing even one or two things? Like if we could ask, what are the one or two things that would make a difference now? Understanding that it's going to be a long process and there's a lot that needs to be changed, but since there's a long history, what can we change now? Like what one or two things, like mandatory professional development for all teachers, or having a coordination between how all the schools respond to hate or bias incidents. And thank you very much for listening and for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for coming. I do want to make a note that we have our DEI subcommittee chair here, and she may be able to speak about, I know this is something that's come out through a lot of conversations, but I just wanted it to be identified as something that we had discussed at a DEI subcommittee meeting 2 months ago, not our last one, but the one before, about exactly that question of how can we incorporate other representation in the school committee meetings, right? So it is something that we've been looking at, and we wanted to kind of get the equity survey results and then figure out how to move forward on some But that is something that's also, it's a concern that's shared also by the school committee itself, that we believe there are new opportunities that weren't necessarily open to us before in terms of how to make our composition.
I don't want to be out of order and engage in any type of discussion, but there are other towns that have representation on their school committees that we're aware of and how they can put it in their bylaws. And then just in terms of professional development, and we should maybe think about doing a presentation on the professional development that's actually happening in our district, because our teachers are all going through rigorous plans. It's like 25 hours they go through. It's graduate level coursework specifically in the area of cultural competency. And we're also going to do like a mini course on that. So I think we can't say that enough in our presentations, and maybe we need to just, get that information out to the community.
And it's important to note, I think, that we, before we engaged fully with Andrew in terms of how to support, he had to process the equity survey, but we ourselves, we felt that it was important that we go through, as Tracy said, a modified version of what our teachers do in terms of DEI training before we were actually prepared to engage more in this, to figure out how to mobilize some of these ideas.
Great. Okay. And that's our last comment, I guess.
That's our last public comment. And it was a different process than usual.
Yeah,
I think it was good.
It is good.
I was very happy to hear from
Yes, absolutely.
certain people tonight.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us, everybody. Thank you for sharing your comments, your concerns, your questions. It's a more dynamic meeting when everybody shows up. I really appreciate it.
Good.
I think with that, though.
Action items.
Oh,
good try.
Not quite.
I could see you were ready to go.
I
Not
know.
quite.
Okay.
All right.
So we have a vote to approve school committee policy, athletic concussion regulations. And my computer's dead, so.
The one link to the agenda is the second reading. This has been reviewed by the nursing staff, by the athletic director, by the athletic trainer. The changes are very few. They relate specifically to the parent who might, or guardian who might bring a athlete home after an event that was a potential concussion, were that child deemed stable. That was the only change in the document. You read that it was last approved February 2015, so in adopting it tonight, a new date would get on it. We're not adopting it with the old date. We would automatically apply a new date to it. And again, this is a second read.
So it doesn't have a date, but we will put one on there. Is that correct?
It has the old date on it.
Oh,
so
okay.
that would be replaced by today's date, should you approve it.
Okay.
And I would move approval.
Mr. Booth moves approval. We just need a second, right?
No, I'll second that.
Okay.
All right. All in discussion? Nope. All in favor? That's an easy policy.
Aye.
We'll take policies like that.
Okay.
Okay. Vote to approve staff children attending CPS CCHS. Dr. Hunter, you should probably lead this conversation.
Sure. We've been gathering these, so you're getting them as a batch right now. They'll certainly still trickle in. Probably the thing of note is that any staff member enrolling their children as for the first time, we're going to shift back to Alcott just to keep enrollments balanced. If kids are already at Willard, we'll enroll the younger siblings at Willard, which is why you've got a mix of things there. So we'll just bring you others should they come through.
Okay.
There's a presumption here that none of these would tip our ratios such that we do hiring based on.
No,
this.
and
I mean, it may happen.
given that it's
but-
contractual, we would figure it out.
Yeah,
presumption.
exactly.
Typically, that amount of students would not.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Be happy to read it if you wish.
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead.
I move that the Concord and Concord-Carlisle school committees vote to approve the following staff requests to enroll their children in the Concord Public Schools, Concord-Carlisle Regional School District for the 2022-2023 school year, and that tuition be waived. Mary Desmond, transition specialist at CCHS, daughters to enroll in 2nd and 5th grade at Olcott. Bree Gap, teacher at Thorough, son to enroll in kindergarten at Olcott. Rodka Grine, teacher at CCHS, son to enroll in kindergarten at Olcott. Kendra Katz, teacher at Carlisle Public Schools, daughter to enroll in 9th grade at CCHS. Lisa Mulcahy, teacher at Olcott, daughter to enroll in kindergarten at Willard. Brian Ravel, teacher at CMS, son to enroll in 6th grade at CMS, and daughter to enroll in 3rd grade at Olcott.
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor? No, sorry, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Our third, vote to appoint CCAC Advisory Committee members. Court, I think you might, Court should speak.
Well, no, I think Eva might help us too while I'm pulling this up.
It's right here. Do I do that?
Sure.
That's cool.
Give me just a moment.
I bring a motion to approve that the Concord and Carlisle School Committee vote to appoint the following at Concord-Carlisle Adult and Community Education Advisory Committee: Steve Resnick to fill the current opening, and Kim Klosman to fill one of the openings in June.
Okay.
Thank you for volunteering.
Is there a second?
Be happy to second that.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Discussion? No?
Well, yeah, thank you for,
Yes.
thank you for your service.
Yes, very important.
Yep.
Very important community resource.
This is one more mechanism by which the schools try to partner and service the needs of the larger community. And we need the help of these volunteers.
I read their latest brochure.
To achieve that.
There's
Yes.
quite a variety of offerings.
Yep.
So,
All right.
There are 1 to 2 openings for the Carlisle position on this advisory.
okay.
So hopefully we'll
I
get
see a
that
few
volunteer.
Carlisle names out there in the audience tonight. I just, before we adjourn, I really, again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. These are not comfortable conversations, right? And the messages are hard to deliver. They're hard to hear sometimes. I thank everybody for their honesty, for their courage in coming forward. I mean, I think Andrew said once, like, if it's not uncomfortable, we're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And so and yet, despite that, I'm not even going to say it was uncomfortable. Like, there's stuff that you don't want to hear because you don't want it to be true to people. But so we're I'm glad that we could have these conversations tonight.
Good.
Thank you. And
Yes.
with that, I will take.
I don't think we voted on the CCAE.
Yeah.
No, that's what we just did.
Did it just move? I don't
No,
think
we didn't do an all
Oh,
in
we didn't do a
favor.
vote.
Oh,
Oh,
geez.
sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, all in favor?
All right,
Aye.
thank you, Carrie.
All right, thank you. Okay, and with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. What?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry. All in favor?
Just the region, folks.
Yeah.
I know.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Lucky you.
Aye, and good night.
Thank
Concord
you.
colleagues.
All right.
Good night.
And
Good
we
night.
continue on with the Concord Public School Committee. So first up is any middle school project update. I don't know who's on deck for that.
I'm sure Dr. Hunter may have something. I can report that there will be a design subcommittee meeting a week from Thursday. That'll be March 17, 7:30 a.m., when the subcommittee will examine its role, function, and responsibility during this new phase called design development. And secondly, that the full committee meets a week later, March 24, again, 7:30 a.m., also on Zoom, open to the public. Please attend. And the contracts or contract amendments, as it may be, with the architectural firm and the owner's project manager, OPM, are in the process of being executed right now.
Okay.
I'm sorry to, can you say the date of the next?
Forgive me, yes.
March 24th. No, I just.
Yeah.
And no,
March
those are
24th.
probably on the building committee website or will be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll certainly be posted.
Okay.
but-
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I can also report, because I read this, that, and Lori certainly can speak to it, that the architect is doing another round of meetings with educators
Oh, yes.
to drill down into even greater and greater detail on how to design the building.
Okay.
And I don't have dates on that, but we're not part of that anyway, but I know
that's their
that's
process.
underway.
All right. Mr. Stanton, we're ready for your presentation.
Very good.
Yeah.
Share the screen. So this will be very similar, not as many actual changes at the Concord side. Great.
And I don't think we noted explicitly earlier, the public hearing is Thursday night, Cynthia?
Correct.
Am I
7
correct?
p.m.
Okay.
Public hearing, yes, at night. I'm not sure if it's the 7 or 7:30 start. I'm not sure.
I think 7.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So starting with the superintendent's, I guess we're still at the recommended budget that's going to be potentially voted tonight, $43,148,899. That is currently $312,585 over the Finance Committee guideline. The budget drivers, this changed a little bit from January 11th, the biggest one being the administration salary. The DEI director is now in this general fund budget as a 0.6 FTE. So that is now a driver. Next, the cost savings actually did change. We increased our circuit breaker offset by an additional $75,000. So therefore the special ed tuitions decreased technically an additional $75,000. And the total cost savings increased to $856,482.
Sorry to interrupt, but you informed us about that in February, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, in February.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed here is the FTE went up 0.2 from the January meeting in the administration.
And is that Andrew?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. There were no changes in the grant offsets. I am sorry, actually there was. We increased this by special education METCO grant, 90,000, and we charged middle school guidance office guidance to that. So we decreased that general fund line and moved it over to the grant. Here's where you're seeing the additional circuit breaker increase. It's now at 725,000. No changes in tuitions. No changes in early retirement or transportation. No changes in the preschool budget. There was a change on this slide. This was due to nursing. We reduced, we had a salary reduction in the nursing line, not FTE, but a salary reduction by about 35,000, 38,000. There were no changes at any of the elementary schools or the middle school. And then lastly, the district-wide location decreased due to the special education offsets and the teachers going to the special ed teachers going to the METCO grant. No changes to the CARES Act or ESSER 3. And here is a new slide that was pretty much copied from the one that we presented to the Finance Committee already, and this is just the capital articles. And that is it.
So I had questions on many of those items which you've now explained to me. My computer's dead, and I'll go back and just double check if I had any more.
Sure.
When I get home, and I'll
Please.
send them to you if you do.
Yeah, I'm looking for, there's only so many times I can see this without, I miss things. So if you see some numbers that look a little off or something, please, I'd rather you question me than fix it before the Finance Committee get a hold of me.
So when do you think you might have the slides to them? Because it's more like to the public as well.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
And same with the budget books. I was just waiting for a little feedback. There was just one very small grammatical error at the high school. I'm just waiting for any more feedback on those, and then we'll post those.
We can always tweak them after the fact.
We
We're not
can.
printing a million copies.
Yes. And in fact, we're not printing many, so if you'd
That's
like
fine.
one, we can certainly do that, because it looks a lot better PDF on the website than it does printed.
No, I don't need to waste paper. We don't need to waste paper.
And just thank you to you and your office on that, because that is a tremendous amount of work, and we recognize that. I'll speak for myself, and we'll see if anyone else agrees with me, but that is a ton of work that goes in during a stressful time of year. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And I know we welcome changes. Bob know.
Joe, would you be good enough to repeat for us both deltas?
Sure. 174,000. 172 under, are you asking it? Okay, yep. 174, 172 under at the high school, and currently 312,585 over at the CPS.
Great. All right, any other questions? Okay. So the next action item, vote to approve superintendent's FY23 recommended budget. I cannot pull up the motion.
Can I speak to it
Yes.
before a motion?
Sure.
Is it as responsible as we can be? Is it politically as astute as it can be to put a formal recommendation on it tonight or after FinCom? And that's just an open question. I don't know. I think it plays different ways if we do it before or after the hearing.
Well, we can always change it up until town meeting. So we can always, if somebody has a strong desire to come back at it at a school committee meeting, they would contact the chair and ask that we have revisit this item. So I don't think, I see what you're saying, but I guess I would say that we would need to have some options on the table or have had so I'm not seeing those right now. And I know we don't, it's not responsible just to unilaterally, make a motion to drop the budget by X amount of money.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not proposing
Yeah,
that.
I know you're
Rather,
not.
what I'm doing is I'm being mindful of two things. One, that we've been experiencing changes in this, that are quite current. And two, this body may have guidance for us. I don't know.
Well, no, we all have to.
That's where I was coming from.
It is our duty and responsibility to listen to the feedback we get at the hearing on Thursday night. So whatever that happens to be.
Can you just clarify the question for me? I think it's a little late in the evening, and I'm like, can you clarify the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
My question was, should we formally approve the bottom line number tonight, or should we do it after the hearing?
At a future
When
meeting.
we've had some exchange with the FinCom, our next exchange with the FinCom, where we bring them one delta under and one delta over.
Do we need to, are you proposing that we all weigh in on that?
Anybody who wants to. I mean, I heard
It's part of the
Cynthia,
discussion.
It's part of the
you know, so,
discussion.
and you know, that's helpful to me.
At the FinCom's last meeting, where they were aware of those two deltas, right? And they didn't, and I was there, and they didn't deliberate on it. Is the suggestion that they may in fact deliberate on it at this hearing? Like, would they weigh in on it?
Just asking the question.
We don't know.
The last number you voted was only different by 38,000.
Right.
This is just to adjust for that one salary
Mhm.
piece.
Right.
The nurse, yeah.
We've been using it, saying it's the new number, not that we said you voted it, but there was an
Sure.
assumption you would for the
Vote.
hearing, so we're gonna be, just have to tweak slides. We're not gonna vote it tonight.
And I don't know exactly, since it's a public hearing and not their meeting per se,
Right.
I don't know what kind of conversation they'll
Yeah, if they
have.
would have anything. even
But they will have a
They
conversation
still
about it.
usually ask the most questions of anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the hearing.
Right, of course.
No,
Do you
I'm prepared.
typically go to the FinCom with some type of vote of support or from the committee?
Would I prefer you vote it? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I'm ready to vote.
No, I'm prepared to move ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Does somebody have the motion in front of them? Or
I have
can
it.
they make the motion?
I have it.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Sure.
The motion is, I move that the town appropriates the sum of $43,148,899 for the necessary and expedient purposes of the public schools of the town for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, and that the same be expended only for such purposes and under the direction of the Concord School Committee.
Second.
Any further discussion, as it is a very important part of our work? Okay, I am ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We have unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. And then, did I jump to the vote? No, I'm good. Vote to accept the donation from the Concord Children's Center. Does anybody have, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's pretty clear what's there. It's just really a fiscal agent shift. The CCC had been managing the money for the playground through the build and fundraising, and that's all over. And so they're really just reallocating it back over to the preschool account.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
Want me to move it?
Yes.
I move that the Concord School Committee vote to accept the donation of $3,367.24 from the Concord Children's Center to the Concord Integrated Preschool Enrichment Fund.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous, and I so declare. All right, I think that is it for tonight. Did I miss anything, colleagues? Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. I like it.
Thank you.
Okay.